got everyone.
We're missing Jeff.
He's on.
Oh, he's right there. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I didn't see you on the board.
Not a problem.
Okay, roll call. Would you call the roll, Mr. Secretary?
You want me to do it? Sure. Commissioner Thine,
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Here.
Commissioner Platt.
Here.
Commissioner Hanning,
Here.
Chairman Hinckley.
Here. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there corrections, additions, objections, comments on the agenda? Hearing
I
none.
move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? I second. Further discussion of motion to approve the agenda without amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Disclosures, Mr. Kennedy?
None.
Gotta do minutes.
Say again?
Do the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jumped into the, okay, minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? And if so, are there comments, corrections, objections? Looking around the table, I see none. I have a motion to approve the minutes as distributed.
So,
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now we'll check that off. Disclosures, Mr. Kennedy.
None.
Ms. Hanning. None. Mr. Platt. None. Mr. Fine.
None.
Lee. None. Okay, we have two applications before us. These are officially public hearings. The procedure we'll follow is to hear a report from the staff, including their analysis and recommendations for the disposition of the application. We'll then invite the applicant to offer their comments, stand for questions. Then we'll open it to public comments. If you're here as a public commenter, please state your name and address for the record. Confine your remarks to 3 minutes, please, and there's no need to repeat what you've already heard. I would also point out that there's an opportunity for all-purpose public comments at the end of the meeting. So the comments will be, at this point, will be specific to these applications, but you'll have your opportunity to speak generally at the end. Once we close the public comments, we'll have a discussion amongst the commissioners, which will result in disposition of the application, either a motion to approve, motion to deny, or motion to table typically. Okay. First item on our public applications is the Taylor application to change the designated zoning district, LUC 0622. Mr. Rose.
All right, the applicant, Stephen Taylor, located at 114 Hornsby Road. Current zoning is agricultural, current use is residential, 2 dwelling units currently exist. Access can be off of Hornsby Road or Peregrine Lane. The applicant is requesting a zoning change from agricultural to rural residential to be able to subdivide their property into a 2-lot subdivision. There were some reviews. The assessor's office, Chelsea Matthew, county assessor, has no concerns. Fire department, Luke Hawkins, chairman, had no concerns. Road and Bridge, Rob Fisher, superintendent, had no concerns, but an approach license will be required to access County Road 43. Applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolution are Chapter 3, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 5. Findings necessary for approval pursuant to the Albany County zoning resolution, Chapter 3, Section 5F. The Board of County Commissioners must make the following findings. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey. The proposed zoning change generally follows the suggestion of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, including but not limited to the Long Range Growth Plan and the Priority Growth Area Statement. The Albany County Attorney's Office has a statement about that. The applicant has adequately addressed the following impacts, and pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution, the applicant has provided the required notice by posted sign publication and certified mailing. Staff analysis is that the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. This property is currently zoned agricultural, and a change to rural residential is compatible with existing land use of surrounding properties. The applicant wants to create a 2-lot subdivision, which will require a subdivision application. Findings of fact: the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings, reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed The specified impacts and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommendation is to approve the Taylor zoning change application LUC 0622, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as these are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mr. Kennedy?
None, thanks.
Mr. Platt?
I don't have any.
Thank you, Mr.
Sure,
Chair.
go right
I mean, one
ahead.
joke, get off easy.
Let them know we read carefully.
Okay, well, I guess. Is my look at the aerial map correct, that the two existing dwellings are like in the opposite corners?
Yep.
And I didn't see, I know we're just at a land use change. We're not talking
Zoning
about
change.
where, pardon me?
Zoning change.
Zoning change. I don't know, because it's LUC, I always get
Yeah.
really literal on things.
Yep.
But, okay, a zoning change. And so first of all, I appreciate this is being proposed to be rural residential instead of some of the smaller lot sizes that could have been proposed. So I appreciate that. But I am also feel torn anytime I see what looks like productive agricultural land being turned into residential. But that's just based off the aerial photo. I don't have, I need to
I'll let
understand.
the applicant address.
Yeah, no, so that's a question for the applicant, whether it's been in use or if it's just been vacant. But when I look at the aerial photo, so it looks like the canal to the north is in active use on that property to the north of this part. I mean, it looks like there's conveyances out of it into that field. You're right, it's a question for the applicant, so we'll put that aside. This could, of course, be subdivided once it receives this zoning change into more lots, that the 36
I forget
acres.
what, is it?
It's 36 plus or minus, could be subdivided additionally, once it's rural residential. And do we know at this point, is this, I'm getting my 7 mile and 9 mile water systems probably mixed up at this point. This is the first application we've seen in a while to add into the 9 mile area.
This is 9 miles.
Previous ones have been set.
Correct.
And so maybe this is another question for the applicant. Are there any assurances at this point from the district that they can, they already have the existing hookups. So, but the fact that you could subdivide it further into more lots, would you expect or want to see that the city has the taps for that now when you give permission for that kind of zoning change? Or is that immaterial?
So right now the plan is to go into 2. As you said, they could subdivide up to 7 lots. That would have to go through the entire process, no matter what,
Right.
especially after it's being subdivided already. So they'd have to go through the whole DEQ review. I guess I don't know about the tap situation, but that would be addressed at that time.
Right, it's sort of between them and the city as to what they can actually procure. Okay, then I think, aside from the question for the applicant, I am done with my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Thine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Hanning's covered my questions, so we'll just wait on the applicant's answer.
All right, my questions were much like Commissioner Hanning's. So there are, just to clarify for me, there's 2 dwellings on the lot right now. And are we simply making that legal by calling it a 2-lot subdivision? I got confused. If there's already 2 there, is one of those getting split in half? We're gonna end up with 3. What's the current?
So there's 2 dwellings, it's 1 lot. I don't know when the dwellings got there. Right now it's 1 lot with 2 dwellings on it.
And now it will be, well.
After it goes through the subdivision process, it would be 2 lots with 1 dwelling on each.
Got it. Okay. And then I would appreciate your response, Mr. Williams, that this is called a land use change, but actually, and this will be a subject later in today's meeting, it's a change of zoning district. The significance of that, of course, is that we are not being asked to approve a 2-lot subdivision. We're being asked to approve a rural residential zone, which could allow up to 7 lots. Okay, just so we're clear what we're doing here. With respect to compatibility, I looked at that, and just to add to your staff analysis, the tract to the north is 243 acre ag tract, but to the south and across the road, they're 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 17, 15. So I have been sensitive in the past to this idea of compatibility and resistant to the idea that residential is inherently compatible with residential. I found this would be compatible even at that higher
Yeah,
density.
we talked about that. We thought it was a good in between the two, ag and small lot. So,
Okay. So, and your staff report might elaborate on that somewhat. I think we're increasingly getting pushback from a lot of directions to make these findings more detailed and explicit. That's certainly one that I think is an important finding and one that is well supported in facts. And that's all I had. Did that spark any other questions for staff from the commission? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, so I was sorry not to see a review by Laramie River Conservation District, Joe. Did this go to them before they hired?
I think it was right in that transition. So it's likely that Martin thought that she might cover it and she didn't know about it or something. I don't know. But it was sent to them.
Is there a way to sort of tap their shoulder again on it before this goes to the Board of Commissioners?
I can ask them. We have to get our packets done by Monday, but yeah, I can certainly ask.
Okay, well, I guess you can only hear no for an answer, so.
Or nothing. So, yeah.
Or silence, I forgot that option. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would support that, the notion that if we're out of sync because we delayed a week, but
Right.
yeah, it would be appropriate to get their comments and we can anticipate it won't be dire if we do get to make that touch.
Sure.
Would the applicant like to address us? It's required, but if you'd like to give us your 2 bits worth and stand for questioning, we appreciate it.
Steve Taylor, 114 Hornsby Road. And it is one tract of 2 dwellings that I plan on subdividing into 2. As far as further subdivision, I have no intention. I really would actually prefer not to have taken it out of agricultural, but I have to subdivide it. But the access points, there are only 2 access points. The Peregrine Lane access and Moulton where they meet, and then one access on Moulton Road. So subdividing further than that would be quite difficult because it's long and thin, and there's other people's lots in between those access points. So you'd have to make a road all the way along the somewhere into it to subdivide it further. And I don't know about the river or water, but it is irrigated from the north, but there's no water rights on the 36 acres that I have, and the lowest point runs along my northern border, and there's actually a ditch there that was previous to when I was there that actually diverts runoff toward that second 9 Mile Lake, the smaller of the 9 Mile Lakes. I'm not sure, when we bought the property, there was something said about it had to maintain that. But that's as far as I know of your questions, if there's any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. That was a lot of detailed information. I appreciate it.
Other questions?
Well, just out of curiosity, where do you get your order?
I'm sorry, what?
Just out of curiosity, where do you get your order?
Yeah, when we purchased the property, we purchased two taps, two city taps. So each side has city water. But as along with access, it would be very difficult to add any more taps because you'd have to go through other people's property to get it there. Yeah.
I was just curious, like I said, thank you.
I know, the other thing I was gonna say was, as far as I know, there are a few more taps available, but on a limited basis. I think last year they were gonna reevaluate that, but I hadn't heard on what they came up with. But as far as I knew, they only had a few more taps available. But as I'm not needing to add any more taps, then yeah, I don't need any more. So
Thank you.
Yep.
thank you.
I should have asked earlier, so if we're not adding homes, why do we need zoning changes? So I
can subdivide because I want to sell the 77 Molten Road side to pay off my mortgage on the 114 Hornsby side.
That's what I assumed, but just so.
Yeah.
Mr. Thine, Flat. Request further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that last question that you asked was the question I was going to ask, so I've been iced out.
Okay, we'll close the public comment and thank you we'll close the applicant's comment. It's open to public comment. Would anybody else like to address this issue? Ms. Brown on the Zoom, would you like to talk about this one? She's on bird. Okay. Hearing none, we'll close. Yes? Okay, heard of.
Oh, do you all want me to give an overview? Is that?
No. I was just wondering if you were attending our meeting to comment on the Taylor application.
Oh, no, sorry. I'm for the next one.
I'm understanding not. Okay, thank you. We'll close public comments. And it's now discussion amongst the commissioners. What's your pleasure? Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of the Taylor zoning change application, C-06-22 to the Board of County Commissioners adopting grade staff analysis, findings of fact, conclusions of law, as each are stated in the staff report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the application. Is there further discussion of the motion? I suppose formal action, we ought to do this by roll call vote. Mr. Kennedy?
Aye.
Ms. Hanning?
Aye.
Mr. Platt?
Aye.
Mr. Stein?
Aye.
Everybody votes aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. And you don't need to attend the rest of our meeting. It's not rude to leave, so you're welcome to get back to the business. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, second application before us is Brown, an application to change, again, another change in the designated zoning district, carrying the ID LUC 0722. Mr. Rose.
All right, the applicant is Brown Pot LLC, located at 90 Vermont. Request is to change zoning from small lot residential to commercial. Current use is vacant. Access can be up to Vermont. Project description, the applicant is requesting a zoning change from small lot residential to commercial to be able to put a duplex on the parcel. There were some reviews. Chelsea Matthews, county assessor, had no concerns. Karen Bowman, senior GIS analyst, had no concerns. County engineer Jake Schneider had no concerns. Road and Bridge, Rob Fisher, says that Gravant and Fort Buford are not dedicated county roads and are not the responsibility of Road and Bridge Department to maintain. Laramie Rivers Conservation District, Holly Dyer, resource specialist, had some comments regarding the soils, vegetation, and weak encroachment. Full comments can be seen in the review section. and YDOT Taylor report, District 1 Premier had no concerns. The applicable sections of the Albany County zoning resolution are Chapter 3, Section 5, and Chapter 5, Section 5. Findings necessary for approval pursuant to the Albany County zoning resolution, Chapter 3, Section 5F. The Board of County Commissioners must make the following findings. The applicant has provided the required site plans and/or survey. The proposed zoning change generally follows the suggestions of the Albany County Comprehensive Plan, including but not limited to the long-range growth plan and the priority growth areas. The Albany County Attorney's Office has some comments on that. The applicant has adequately addressed the following impacts, and pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 5 of the Albany County zoning resolution, the applicant has provided the required notice posted sign, publication, and survey. Staff analysis, the applicant has addressed the potential impacts the zoning change may cause and has provided a complete application. This property is currently zoned small lot residential, and a change to commercial is compatible with existing land uses surrounding properties. The applicant wants to put up a residential duplex on this parcel. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval and applicant responses referenced in this report are adopted as findings reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County zoning resolution. Staff recommendation is to approve the Brown Paw zoning change application LUC 0722, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
The only thing that caught my eye was I kind of assumed that the Conservation District recommendation was weed encroachment, not weaken.
Oh, yeah, that's probably it. I was reading it, I was like, that's not right.
Can't look at something too long.
Yes, confirmed weed encroachment.
Other comments?
None, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gomez, I like the way you abridged and the county attorney has something to say about that.
I didn't want to read it.
That was a clever way to not have to repeat all of that. So I don't know, this might be a question for David. It gets more into the history of the land use table where multifamily dwellings are permitted. And so they're permitted on ag land or allowed, permitted or allowed on commercial, but then it's conditional on rural residential and then prohibited on the smaller residential types of zoning. And so it just, what it seems to do in my view, especially in this particular area of the city-county interface, is it seems to create more opportunities for sort of low-income housing in sort of a commercial and industrialized area that seems like not compatible uses for the residents of the county. And so I just wonder why it was that, I mean, like, say, urban residential, which you can see a little in this area, right? I know it doesn't show up much as a zoned district right now, but this is the area where you find that. Like, wouldn't that be a better zoning designation to give something like a multi-family dwelling? You know, in the hopes that eventually, I mean, the idea is, and already you see that, right? Properties getting annexed in the city, a couple at a time. And is the idea that eventually this whole area could end up someday slowly. I know that's a threatening concept. It's because it's up to the landowner to decide. It's not up to the city, but you see this area changing that way. And I know you can't do anything about the zoning resolution, but I wondered if you had the backstory to why it's set up this way. Because it seems to push multifamily, which tends to be a lower income type of housing that we provide to our residents. And it seems to push it more into, you know, commercial areas instead of residential areas. So that maybe you can't recount the history.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So, okay, I'll try to recall why we did the way we did it, or when the zoning was changed. I believe that the pre-existing zoning that we created in 1997, I believe this was kind of followed that pattern. We really, honestly, we didn't really account for multifamily type situations. So if you look at our resolution too, like mobile home parks as well are commercial use. So it's kind of commercial has become, it was created like as a catch-all almost, like you can do commercial businesses as well as do kind of the multifamily and those types of things. Any of our other zoning would not allow for this density of housing or the density of dwellings. And so honestly, it's probably something that, we should look at or address. I mean, to have some kind of a zoning designation that deals with this specific instance. And honestly, the mobile home park thing, maybe that's something we want to deal with, that type of a business as well. So why we did it that way, I don't exactly remember. We just don't see a whole lot of it, but in this area where there's water, I mean, there's a potential for that. So I think it was just something that wasn't, we don't see it a lot either.
I don't think it was contemplated a lot at the time.
Right.
It's something you see more being proposed in the city limits and not so much in the county.
And like I said, I think this is how it was patterned in the original zoning in 1997, that we just kind of followed it over into what we have now. So probably not the best scenario, because you're putting multifamily in a commercial zone, which if everything else is commercial, then it's, who knows what you got around you.
Right, it could be a mall, it could be. But in this case, it's a cement plant.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
That's what I remember. So.
That's all I wondered about with it. And I know it's nothing to be done here about the application in front of me. I just sort of wondered about the overall mindset of that approach. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Platt, I think you have a question along those same lines.
Yeah, in fact, I'll just note for everyone here, the chairman and I had a discussion on this very thing yesterday. And we were not looking at the land use table when we were discussing that. Commonly in many other zoning resolutions, regulations, everywhere in the country, there is a distinction made between duplexes and multifamily. They're not considered one and the same thing. I was wondering why we couldn't use urban residential for this, but now I see why it's being done that way. And I'll say this for our session. I don't have any further questions.
Well, yeah, let me, perhaps I didn't hear it clearly. Why couldn't this be? It's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
It's a prohibited use.
Well,
and there isn't a separate category called duplex.
Well, urban residential, I'm reading from the zoning regs, says is primarily for single family uses.
Mr. Chairman, you need to look at the land use table though.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, I didn't catch that yesterday.
All right, I see.
Now I see.
All right, good answer. And I like the idea, which we can discuss another day, of creating a home for these. So then just a quick follow-up there. In the language where it says one dwelling, a duplex would not count as one dwelling.
Correct.
Okay, we're kind of used to dwellings. Okay. I guess have we finished going around, Mr. Thine?
No further questions.
Okay, just a couple of comments, general questions. And I think we're clear on this, that we are approving a zoning district of commercial, which includes everything under the sun, which would then be allowed much under conditional use permit if we go forward. I'm assuming that there is no such thing as a zoning approval for a stated purpose. I think we continue to have zoning changes come before us, knowing that the intention is to lot split or do a multifamily residence or something. But I think I've heard the answer before, but just let's be clear on that. There is no way we can say we approve zoning change for this purpose.
No, you can't put conditions on it.
Okay, that's what I had thought. Mr. Fisher had some comments about public access. Is that
All that day.
an issue? I know that can get sticky. Maybe it's premature. Don't talk to us about that.
What did he say?
About Gravant, not being county.
Oh, yeah, so, Mr. Chair, his comments are, he just is putting the applicant on notice to know that the county's not gonna maintain those roads. That was his basis.
Wasn't there,
Which he tends to put that in there just to make sure.
there was a history of something
yeah.
years ago.
Not very many years ago, there's been some discussion of some of the roads down there and finger pointing and who needs to maintain them. And ultimately, they're public access roads, but the county has never accepted dedication of those roads to take over maintenance and ownership of those roads. So that's why I put that in.
Commission, I'd like to add just a comment to the roads. We are looking at pricing for construction and are considering the improvement of Gravant Street. If you have driven down there, it is very rough, and we were just going to take that cost upon ourselves and be a good neighbor while we're looking to build foundations or anything. So we've been preparing for that already.
Okay, thank you. And we'll give you a chance to comment here in a moment. Given the proximity of this city, are they not being invited to comment? What's the story there?
The city has never been invited to comment on zoning issues. It's only been plating and subdivision issues.
And is that consistent with statute? I'll look over at our council here.
Yeah, there's nothing in statute.
Mr. Chair, there's no statutory requirement for anything but plating specifically.
Thank you. Good answer. And that's all I had. Any other comments that those generate questions for staff? Okay, with the applicant is welcome to, anything else you wanted to say, or were there any other questions for the applicant since she's made herself available?
I've got a question.
Let's go in order, Mr. Kennedy.
Let him go ahead. We're already there.
Okay, it's fine.
Ms. Brown, there's, I'm going to say, a good chance that in the relatively near future, we're going to attempt to perhaps create some additional allowed uses to our zoning districts. And if we were to create something allowed in duplexes for a non-commercial type district, and we're to come back to you and want to rezone your property to a duplex type zoning, would you have any objection to that?
No, I wouldn't. I do agree that, the zoning to commercial is odd because of the uses, and the area is, primarily residential. So no, I wouldn't have any issues with that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Simon.
Nothing further.
Nothing more from me. Absent additional comments, questions for the applicant, we'll open this to public comment. Yes. You're certainly welcome to come forward at this point if you want to add something to our discussion.
Okay, I guess I'm across. My name is Jamie Gilly. So I guess one of the first questions they have is just how big of a duplex is it? Going to be 1 story, 2 story? Do we know those kinds of things yet?
Yes, I would offer that is germane to a change to a commercial zoning. I suppose if the applicant wants to respond.
I believe it's in the application. There's a picture of that.
I believe it's 3,200 square feet in a single story dwelling.
Yeah, we are looking at the cost of things. As you all know, construction has been quite a challenge this year, so we're not 100% set on the layout, but the one story is what we're looking at.
And then as for, there's multiple questions about water and sewer and how those things, since there's a different water district, the South of Laramie Water District, how that sewer and stuff would then be taken, how that would happen, where it would occur, kinds of questions.
Yeah, again, just with the caution that whatever Ms. Brown says today is not binding in any way. They'll have to come back to us with all those details, but just for the sake of the interested public, we can certainly have that discussion. Ms. Brown, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So the water, we would be connecting to the South of Laramie. We've talked to them. I believe there's actually already a tap or service line installed whenever they put in the water lines out there. So we just have to connect to that. Sanitary sewer would be with a septic system. And so there's requirements for that, for setbacks and everything. I think probably the biggest concern, which is on my end, is to just make sure that I stay away from the well on our property. But the sanitary sewer, the leach field would be located out in the center of the property. And then other utilities are just dry utilities, telephone and internet, but.
Well, furthermore, I guess.
Does that answer your questions?
What we're trying to find out is there's other homeowners.
Yeah, come up here and introduce yourself just so the record is clean up.
I'm Crystal. I guess one of our biggest things is Crystal. That's all.
Okay.
Is there's other homeowners that have been trying to fix sunken septics, sunken water lines, and they've been denied because they were told they cannot do it due to the aquifer out there. Even though, as far as we know, there was no aquifer, but they have been denied to fix things up out there. So that's what we're trying to figure out. How can a new place be able to be zoned and do a commercial, and existing people have not been able to actually fix their own stuff out there?
Again, we're straying a bit.
That's what we're trying to figure out, is why, how can they zone it commercial and our residential people can't even take care of our own things out there.
Yep.
That's our biggest problem.
Mr. Gertz has a comment on that. You're welcome.
I can honestly say I'm not aware of that situation. If they were talking to our previous wastewater engineer, he's no longer with the county, he's retired, so I'm not sure the situation. But I mean, I know each property is required to have a septic system that they're going to use services in their homes.
Well, so there's some properties out there that are not being used. They can't have residents in them due to the fact that they've been denied. They have not been able to redo the septics.
Okay, yeah, I'm not aware of those.
So that's our problem.
If you want to come to the office, we can look through the records and maybe have to find as much information on that as we can, but I'm not aware of those situations.
And if there's an enforcement issue out there, Mr. Gertz is the one to take that up with. I guess we're still in the process of hiring a new sanitary engineer, wastewater engineer.
Yes.
So certainly.
I mean, I know that's
an issue there that
big
should
thing.
be resolved. This probably isn't the forum for that, but I think Mr. Gertz could give you the appropriate guidance. And then certainly, if these guys do follow through with their notion to build a duplex with septics, they will have to build it fully up to development standards.
I'd really like to see what the water district would say, because doing the redoing that road, that water line, it's not the line yet, is like this much above the road already.
And a lot of
So
adequacy of water and wastewater are typically things that are reviewed when a development proposal comes forward. Again, what we're doing now is just, is it allowed in general along a lot of
So, but yeah, that's what we really, if it's commercial, trying to get, the residents around there, trying to get them to, because we've got 3 commercial properties already that are out there that are sad,
Yeah, if there's
that need to be taken care of, really.
if someone's not
So-
meeting standards, yeah, talk to Mr. Gertz's office. Unless you want to oppose the granting of a commercial zoning today, that's.
So, but yeah, that was our concerns on making it a commercial, is because seems like they want to do commercial and not help out the residents trying to, so that's what. our thing
Thank you
is.
for that comment. Other public comments? Okay, appreciate that. And seeing no one on the Zoom, we'll close public comments, which turns us back to the commission. Just further discussion. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this I don't think it's the best time to take this up, but I would just like, again, since we're all here, comment along the lines I was commenting yesterday and to the staff, that I would like to see in our zoning district language for the following districts: rural residential, small lot residential, urban residential, every place where we see dwelling unit, single family dwelling unit, we add the words or duplex. And this is obviously gonna happen today, but I would like to see that change done. I think that, again, looking around in other county regulations, whatnot, you see that all duplexes and single family dwellings are treated in many districts as one and the same, or as additional allowed use. And I think this points out why it'd be useful here too. Easy to understand. I think the county commissioners would approve that. So anyway, I want to make that comment.
And we will be taking up amendments to the zoning resolution later today. Are there other comments on the application before us? And hearing none, we're open to a motion for disposition. And if I'm correct, there are none, so feel free.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval of the Brown Paw zoning change application LUC 0722, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as stated in the staff report.
Is there a second?
I second.
Further discussion of the motion? Going once, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I guess, an idea has been proposed and asked of the applicant, which we know is it's a voluntary thing. That someone would come back in and maybe get their fees waived to rezone to a residential zoning category. I mean, we can't condition that. We can't require that or do anything with that. Can we? We can't table this for such a long time that we try to get the reg change done first. Like, that's also not
Well, it
a
also was,
realistic, pragmatic thing. to
they
do
wouldn't
to the app.
be allowed to, like, the application was turned in before that change were to take place.
Right.
That,
Oh, yeah.
those rules
the
wouldn't
old-
take place.
Good
Well,
point.
you could invite the
Old
applicant
rules.
to withdraw their application.
But you could
Pending
ask
further
them to-
developments that.
You could ask them to withdraw and submit. Thanks.
I'll just say to that, Laura, that the purpose of my question is to get a sense of Mrs. Brown's, because it's what, Mrs. I'm trying to get into anything today. If we can make a good faith effort to take care of this later on, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, but not at all. I didn't have any idea of like what's delay is or table this or condition or anything like that. Right. Absolutely not.
Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Hanning, the Planning and Zoning Commission can also initiate a zoning change on its own. So
Good point.
that would be another option.
The public can too, right? Or is it just us?
Yeah.
Anybody can come in.
Sure, get one can't. It's gotta be a copy of it.
No, anybody can come to us asking for an amendment on anything. We could show them the door, or we can embrace it, or whatever. There's no.
about a specific zoning district change.
Well, but you're talking about a change in the zoning regulation not a zoning change, if you're gonna broaden it out and change the criteria, so that's a whole different story. So I guess what I'm hearing from Commissioner Henning is the possibility that the applicant might want to wait until such time as we might choose to change the zoning rules and then go ahead and zone it under that new zoning. That proceed, that sounds long. Would you like to put that question to the applicant?
I guess my comment would be if someone at some point in the future, if someone wishes to, I'll put it as downzone something. In other words, there would be fewer permitted uses on the property. I think if this is what we want to encourage, we would need to waive fees on something like that, because otherwise there's no incentive for anyone to ever downsell. Other than to allow a use that wouldn't be allowed on that particular zoning designation. That's the only reason that they would do so. That probably accurate
Mr.
description
Chair.
of human behavior.
And Commissioner Kennedy, if it were to be initiated, because under our current regulations, zoning change can be initiated at the request of the board of county commissioners, this commission, planning staff, or a private entity, which that leaves it very open-ended. And at that point, the applicant would be the county. So.
And I seem to recall within the last year and a half that we did downzone one at the request of the owner because the single family residence wasn't allowed on that zoning, so that we actually changed zoning to, it was agricultural from commercial.
North.
Yeah, I'm,
Way up north.
yep.
So what's the disposition of your comment?
Sorry for our tangents, Ms. Brown. So I don't know what kind of hurry you are in to do your development. Are you open to entertaining withdrawing your application so we can try to fix the zoning issue to make this a more compatible land use zoning district with the other residences in the area?
And not at this time. I would like to keep my application in place. Though I don't know if y'all really remember me, but I am a land development engineer. And so I'm very familiar with the zoning and things in town. And I am very willing to change the zoning in the future. You know, David, I feel like David knows me well, and, you know, he can reach out to me at any time if that's something that the county is looking to do. So.
Thank you. Expected answer, Mr. Birch, your comment.
What I would say is, you know, if we did change the zoning for this type of purpose, we might look at other properties that are in the same situation as well. And if you lump them all together, you know, it's not necessarily an individual property we're looking at. It's more of a change to our, I don't know, the general zoning change for all the properties that are.
And I was just thinking sort of a mop-up, clean that type action later
Right,
on.
Okay,
right.
along with Mr. Brown. Sorry, let's
Applicant
confine
at all.
ourselves to the application in front of us, which is a zoning change to commercial for Ms. Brown. Are there other discussion comments on that? Would someone like to make a motion to proceed? Motions.
There's already a motion on.
Oh, there was?
Yeah,
Okay.
in a second.
Okay, I've lost track of it in the discussion. All right, hearing it. So the motion on the floor is to approve with appropriate conditions and findings. If there is no other discussion, Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Sam. What? Aye. Mr. Stein.
Aye.
Hinkley votes aye, it's unanimous. Thank you for the robust discussion. And you need not stick around for the rest of our exciting meeting. And then be aware that this will be presumably followed up by a specific development proposal, which will then also come before this body. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good point. Okay, current planning projects, let's move on. We have two packages of amendments before us, and so the first question would be how best to proceed. Mr. Kennedy's the only city commissioner who's been through this before, so maybe we can start with David. Matt, remind us, how do we do this? Do we have to have a 30-day and then we approve and it goes to the commission and they do 40 work sessions versus special sessions? Kind of walk us through the process for making amendments to our zoning regulations.
Yeah, so with big amendments like these, what I would suggest, and I don't know if it's necessarily statute, but to follow kind of the comprehensive plan type statute, that's the 30 days before planning and zoning. But then when we take it to the board, we have to follow the Administrative Procedures Act, and which is 45 days. So that would be my suggestion. That way, we would put it out and have ample time for other people to look at it, bring us comments here, so you guys can have some feedback from the public to see if that's kosher what we're doing, or if we want to tweak things or whatever. The more we can get done in this group, the better it is for the Board of County Commissioners. So that's my suggestion.
And I think when you originally put it on the agenda, you put schedule a work session. In the city council context, I know work sessions are not for making decisions.
We could schedule it as a special meeting, and then that would be, everything's actionable at that.
Okay.
I guess my comment on that is I think it's reasonable for us to do a work session for things that we have caught ourselves before that goes out to the public with the 30 days notice, and then our hearing, where depending on what public comment is, we may decide that we need to put that off another month. And so the meeting, which my own wish would be that it would be at our regularly scheduled time. Even though there certainly will be some other applications that are need to be made, it's more reasonable to the public to have it at our regular time rather than to schedule a special meeting solely for that, and be prepared to be here a while.
Okay, and the you're talking about would be the discussion that you would prefer not to do it in a separate session.
Yeah, I really think that there would be a lot gained by us doing the changes that we believe should be made, so that that's what the public sees when we have our scheduled hearing for it, so that they've got some time to look at things that we already would like to change in there from what we see here.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. That discussion of what we want to see changed, you'd like to see that conducted at a regular
I think
meeting.
I think we could do that at a work session, so that the work product from what we have is what is available to the public when they come to us and comment. In other words, we don't have more amendments that we want to make at the time of the public hearing, that this is what we think things should be like. So please comment, so that it's not a surprise to them, to the public, of any changes that we want to make. That's what they ought to see, is what we believe should go forward.
And honestly, that's kind of the process we have followed, is
Yeah.
the work session, where we're really not taking public comment at that time. You're just working through it. You're really working on the document. And then once you're done with that, then you take it to a regular meeting, and then we get all the public comment at that time.
Maybe I'm missing a distinction here, because at that work session, you are making decisions. Let's
No.
do this.
You haven't made any decisions. You
You're not
are
gonna be-
merely putting your draft that you want the public to comment on, so that it's unfair to the public for us to have things that we want to change in this draft and do that at the hearing, because they don't have that in front of them.
But there's someone's making those decisions.
It's not a decision.
You're not making
a
motions,
decision
you're not
in a
making
work
motions.
session.
I understand that. Somebody has to
Talk about-
decide, let's do the words, da, 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 da. That's a decision. So,
Well, it's a proposal.
It's a proposal because we haven't had a public hearing and we haven't had a meeting.
We're
It's
trying
to compare
to
drafts so the
to a-
public can see the draft.
Yes.
And that's where we discuss.
You're doing your work.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing your work, but nothing is a decision until you send it off. I see what you're saying, and I guess, I don't know, maybe that's
I don't know.
there's
Mr. Harrison, you
another
wanna weigh in on this?
explanation or something, but that's the process we've used in the past, whether it's, we're making decisions by changing the words.
So right now, we've got a draft, a first
so,
draft, and this should be a group draft that we all agree on, and then we have the meeting for the public to comment on.
No, I understand the process and I fully endorse that. It should be completely transparent. Nothing should happen without every public having an opportunity to comment. I'm just call it the power of the pen, and it is powerful indeed. What you're seeing in front of you today was written by Mr. Ayers and Mr. Inkley. We're going to change that as a suggestion from us, and we will make some decisions on how to change that. But all right, I guess I'll let that kind of float along and we'll call it a work session. Totally agree that whatever we come up with at some point needs to go out to public comment in final form. I think that's your point. There's no switching at the last minute.
Yeah.
Okay, totally agree.
Which also doesn't mean that we don't incorporate any changes that the public addresses, things that we might have too.
Yeah, you end up with a chicken egg kind of thing there, and somehow you gotta put a stop to.
But I don't think it's fair on our part to go through individually and bring things forward at the public hearing.
Okay.
And for that matter, there may even be some places where we have, and I'm pretty sure we've done this in the past when we went through this before, David, where we actually had alternatives on a few things too. So that was something that we encourage public comment on. If there was alternatives that the commission had, those were out for the public to say, we prefer this, or what's your reasoning behind the reason you want it this way.
Okay, so do we let the kind of author carry the pen forward? I mean, let's say it says 14 days someplace and we all are talking about it and think, 19 would be better. Then somebody writes that down and we come back to us with 19 instead of 14. Is that the
Well,
process?
Mr. Ayers may have a
Yeah.
comment on the legality. A proposal that one of us makes for a change, he certainly may say, no, you can't do that. And that's kind of the final word there.
Yeah, Mr. Ayers, I'm just looking for a procedure here.
Sure. Mr. Chair, as far as the reason I used the term work session is because that's what I've seen them called in the past. And I don't really know what that means in the context of the city. And because it is just that. I mean, we're going through, we're editing, we're drafting. And that's really just due to public meetings requirements. If there's a quorum and there's deliberation on an item, then there has to be notice. And it has to be held in a public setting, or in a public meeting rather. But I think what would happen in between those is not quite as relevant. I mean, it could be myself or working with David and Joe to come up with a newer draft to reflect the suggestions which were put forth during the special meeting, I guess. Or it could be, for the zoning change or zoning district amendment processes, it could be yourself.
I'm not volunteering for this. It just seems to me that somewhere there has to be a way to pull that all together into exactly what you're talking about. A single, here's the suggestion, folks.
Yes.
And that's the work session.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, well, and these both I assume strike us as work session material, they did you. But what we're having right now is an opportunity to begin that process, which I think we should take advantage of. So I guess the most basic question I'm asking is, what do you want to do with the rest of this meeting? And I'm thinking that we begin to work through these at least a general level, and then we can all take these home with us, provide comments to the authors, and come back to a work session and iron out language. Does that sound acceptable? Okay. Then let me ask a mechanical question of what's the easiest, those of you who are now looking at this, to digest. I talked to Mr. Ayers about these red lights, they've become this bloodbath somewhat deceptively. There isn't that much change. We can start moving things around. So comments from readers, what's easiest for you to understand what's being said?
And part of this is because of the nature of what I do a lot of my life. But can't even remember whether I looked at it in color version, but if additions are made in blue underline, and that makes it a lot more clear to me, because I'm very used to working with red strike through and blue underline for additions.
Okay, and then but in the large blocks, this particularly in the planning one part, are just moved. I found it useful to know whether I'm reading something new or just reading something that used to be somewhere else. Is there a convenient way to do that? I guess I'm looking at you, Mr. Kennedy.
In my mind, it's a deception that happens at the legislature where it says that this reference is struck because you don't see the language that was stricken. And those of us that do that for a living know that when you see that little short sentence, you need to go back to the original document and pull all of that language up. And so I prefer it this way because I think it makes it more transparent as to what you're taking out, rather than just say, we're striking these section C1 through section C4, and we're putting in a new C1 through C whatever. To me, this is the most transparent way to do it.
The way that they were
Yeah.
distributed, Rich.
Yeah.
Well, that's good then, because that's the way it is.
I mean, it makes it clear to you what has been removed, but it would, in my mind, it makes it easier if additions, and I'm like on page 1-3, if the addition that was put in there was in blue rather than red underline, it makes it a little bit clearer. I'm old enough that I'm also used to just all black and white, so just strike and underline, but the color being the same makes it a little bit harder to follow.
I think that's an option.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
if I may just make a few
Please.
comments on just mechanically. Generally what I've seen is when you move something within a document and you have the review turned on, it will double underline. I don't know why that didn't occur on this one. And as for the color, it seems to be determined by word. Sometimes I will open the same document, it will be blue, sometimes it'll be purple, sometimes it'll be red.
There's some.
Um,
Oh, yeah, look at that.
So I don't,
I'm so used to having to go in and do the change font when I make edits on stuff, to do that all the time, because I follow you, and as long as this is, it would be somewhat tedious to do that all the way through, but I get you.
So I apologize.
Since I'm very clear that it was done in Word with the way the comments come up, so.
And okay, then.
And I did prepare a narrative for where
Yeah, that was my next question. Again, just purely mechanically, what's easiest for folks? And certainly Jeff weighed in here. We all do a lot of document review. Comments on the side, cover letter comments, the stuff I put together, you saw me just put them in square brackets, so they were just solidly right in the text. That seemed to be easiest. Does that make any difference? Does some work better than others? You're muted, Jeff, please.
I do have an opinion. I kind of agree with Commissioner Kennedy. You know, this all red, is that a thick line, a thin line? What does this all mean? Seems to me it could work a lot faster if we understood this is new language, make it green. I mean, I'm just, you know, spitballing here, but new language can be green, moved language can be blue. It makes this whole process much more efficient for me anyway. And I would think for other people too, because currently I just have the PDF, everything's red. And I've got to start searching around when I see something put in, did this come from someplace else? So some indication of that would be, to me, make things a lot more transparent. Because otherwise it's going to be hours of searching around because is this new language or is this not new language? Is there some way to indicate that? So that's my basic comment.
Well, anything we can do to improve that would also improve the ability of the public to understand what we're trying to do and to respond back. So maybe we kick that to our word processing folks. I'm not sure who that is, except not me.
Me and Word do not get along.
Well, okay, who?
Just so you know.
Joe. Usually it's the youngest person in the room. It's like,
I mean, I'm looking at Word right now to see if I can change the colors and stuff, but it doesn't. I don't.
A lot of times I know that if one person edits it, it'll be one color. If you give it to someone else, it'll be a different color for someone else.
That's what yeah.
Is there a way just to put in the comment field, like,
Yep.
you know, almost like a crosswalk of sorts, like this came over wholesale from chapter 4.
Well, I
chapter
think he
5.
did that
No,
for
no,
a lot of it.
That's true. I mean, it's,
Like some of it's like clarifying language. I know
so
later on.
anytime there's
it's like
something
this
new,
from-
you've already put a comment field.
Mhm.
That,
And,
you know.
and I went through and added some more of those.
Because I got bogged down
'Cause, you
right
know,
around
after-
page 116, like all of a sudden realizing, no, I mean, it's important to do, it's our job to do, is to compare what got moved from the one to the other and to lay them out next to each other and you know, and do the time. And I don't know if there's a way to make it any clearer than what you've already done besides fixing some kind of color thing that sounds elusive.
well, lots of comments. I mean, you can't have too much, hey, folks, this is new. This came from, that would.
New
probably
stuff
be-
here, this is all
Yeah,
old
yeah,
stuff.
just tell us what's going on. Of course, I'm just-
Guys, maybe I'm missing something here. You just highlight the text and pick the color.
Yeah, that would.
That's pretty standard
Here's
in my world.
Is it showing better? Oh,
You would have
okay,
to
blue.
go through, accept all changes,
and then change all the.
and then change all that. Oh, but if you accept all the changes, then it would take all the stricken through language out. and that
Correct.
would-
No, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that.
So,
I mean, I only have a PDF document, or I would just demonstrate. But, you know, I don't have a Word file. So I'm not asking something that's incredibly difficult. I think Commissioner Kennedy's point is well taken. You know, those of us who do a lot of this kind of review, there are basic standards or patterns that people kind of follow on documents. And particularly if you're going to convert them to PDFs, you got to have some methodology to do that, because otherwise you could just take the original Word document and the new Word document and just compare. That's another opportunity to kind of accomplish the same thing. And just speaking for myself, if you're talking about a work session, that you're going to come to a work session, you're going to sit down, all 5 of us, and staff, of course, too, and actually go through and make all these changes or approve these changes in the case of, proposed language and everything, then it's not very efficient if it's all written.
So did people get?
Maybe you guys know this stuff so well that it's different. But,
I believe it was sent out as PDF.
Yeah.
And
And
if there's,
having converted a lot of them, the comments don't come through just the
Right.
fonts, and it turns into a real mess of it. If that might actually be easier for the commission if we all had it in Word rather than a PDF.
yeah, it would definitely look different. I think Commissioner.
it looks like all of my comments came through, or at least
Well, I guess I'm not
my
seeing
proposition, and
what the
it's.
issue is, because I can see exactly what's going on.
So the new language is that which is,
I can't
is
too,
in color
because I'm used to straight
and
through.
underlined.
Yeah, this is what we do.
The deleted language is stricken through.
Okay, so for people to comment on it, then
Okay.
is it easier in PDF or should we distribute it amongst ourselves in Word so that?
But let me just interrupt. The new language, is that all new language or is that moving from some other place? That distinction's not clear based on, I almost feel like I need a map in this, guys.
Paste, so you cut and paste over from chapter 4 to chapter 5. And then anything you needed to do to improve on what you cut and pasted over, you highlighted with this pen.
Well, I tried to make comments on where it was coming from, whether it was new statutory language to replace the old, or whether it was a carryover from additional requirements that were in the previous version to the new one.
Can I just say, formatting aside, what I've looked at so far, I think you've done a tremendous job and that it's a really, looks like a good cleanup effort and a lot of effort to accommodate a lot of the comments that you've heard here. So we're focused on the red line strikeout, and I just want to give an umbrella statement that I like so far what I've been looking at. I haven't made it all the way through yet, but I'm pleased with the cleanup effort and the consolidation of things. And I think it's a very clever way that you're trying to deal with breaking things into a 2 review process.
Could we get?
Yeah, sorry,
Can we
you're
get
right.
to the
Back
substance?
to that. I just thought,
I do think, before we leave this meeting, I very much want to have that.
you're right. Sorry, I just needed to go positive for a minute.
Okay, so I guess current setup would be better if it were distributed in Word.
I'll do it right.
Now,
We'll put the packet together in PDF and then we can give you a separate Word.
okay, we're talking about this work session, so it's slightly
Yeah.
different.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That the whole
Yeah,
public
whatever
has
you
to
guys
see. We're just, what's the tool that makes it
Yeah.
easiest for us? That's what I'm struggling with.
Sure.
All right. Second question, do we want to move both of these packages were developed in response to specific issues and requests from the board that came up last year? Do we want to move them along sequentially or in parallel? Right now, we're dealing with them in parallel. Is there a strong feeling amongst the commission, you want to take one of these clear to the end, be done with it, then take out the other one? Or can we do both of them at the same time?
I personally prefer to do sequential. When was the last time we changed the zoning regulations?
Zoning was 2015.
Yeah. I can't remember what else was on our plate at that time, but you lose focus when you've got 2 in front of you.
Before 2015, we had the aquifer
Yeah.
protection stuff, which is in zoning, but it should have been ran separately.
Yeah.
And we got them all mixed together and it was a problem.
Yeah.
So.
I think just to avoid even more confusion, it's a lot easier to do one at a time. And I guess my thought would be also on scheduling a work session would be how long do we think we need? And would it be appropriate to do, like we did last summer, do a work session before the meeting, before our regular meeting?
Just immediately before.
Yeah. And that way we can maintain focus on what we're supposed to focus on.
Sure.
I defer to you guys. It's your workload that we're talking about. I don't know what else you got coming down the chute and whether it's better for you guys to double them up or have them come through the chute one at a time. I understand Commissioner Kennedy's point is a good one, and I agree with that, but I also just want to be sensitive to what you are already juggling and have coming.
I personally would rather do them sequentially. That being said, the zoning one's not as big a lift, I don't think, as the subdivision. I think that one would be pretty quick to dispose of unless there's some major issues with it or whatever. I went through it pretty thoroughly today, and I mean, there's a few tweaks in there that I might recommend, but like, I like it. I think it's pretty good, and I guess it's up to you guys what you think, but I think that would be pretty quick.
I'll make the same comment I made to Commissioner Hinckley, which I think it's in pending review by Matt. I think it's virtually publishable now as is, as far as I'm concerned. I've gone through it twice. I think it's good.
Well,
yeah,
straw poll. Mr. Kennedy, did you attempt to look at it all?
I did. I actually got completely through it finally very late last night. But I would, having seen lots of mistakes made in haste, I would like to do it sequentially, and I'd be fine with taking up the zoning first. It's not as heavy a lift, and in some ways it's almost like weightlifting. It's a little bit easier to get in the groove and do a work session, do that. We would have the public meeting then the next month, assuming that we did it just before our regular meeting, and then take up the next one. That'd be my preference.
Mr. Thine, a thought on that?
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, 5 made sense to me. I'm sorry, the zoning resolution made a lot of sense to me, the way it had been edited. And I could quickly see, oh, you're changing, you've highlighted the sentence, and then the next sentence is something that is the alternative language proposed. So 5 or I'm sorry, the zoning resolution was pretty straightforward to get through. And I am happy to take that up first. I do think we got to get in the groove because at least in the PDF form, the subdivision one was much more difficult to untangle. And what I had to stop after a little while, to be honest, and just say, I'm going to need the author here next to me to kind of like tell me, hey, where did this come, or what does this mean? You have a thin red line and a thick red line, and that all the text is red. And I'm sure there's a methodology that you pursued that once I learned, like I said, a map index or however you want to put it, then I could follow it. Right now, I'm kind of like going, wait a minute, I have to flip back through 10 pages and I think I saw the same language here. I guess that's a move. And so, like I say, I think that's Commissioner Kennedy's suggestion is a good one. And I'm down with that. Let's handle the zoning thing first.
All right, well, I appreciate that. I felt like what I was doing for that was kind of codifying things that we talked about, and it wasn't a lot of this 7 should be 12.
Yeah, no, I thought it was very straightforward. It was a good job too. Let me echo that, Mara. I know I can be a little critical. I apologize for that. I wasn't talking about the content. I was talking about trying to sort all the content out and understand the language and make sure that the intent was properly there. And I think it all goes all the way back to the idea that the commissioner put forward, which is, finish it up, get it into a form the public can look at it and the public can have comments. And at the meeting, that's what they're commenting on. And so the faster we can do that, the quicker this all resolves itself and we can move forward. And I just want to add the comment that it was kind of striking tonight. Both the applicant and the people in the neighborhood said the same thing, which is, what is this commercial? Or this commercial doesn't seem to fit, or there's a difficulty with using a catch-all phrase like this and what it implies. And so the quicker that can be straightened out, the better too.
So make best use of us being here. I guess what I thought going into this and discussed with Mr. Ayers, Mr. Gerch, was that we would spend a little time on each of them at the kind of the top level to Mr. Commissioner Hanning's comments to then help guide our thinking as we go forward. Is that appropriate, or do we want to do the split now and let's just talk zoning and then it helped me just to have kind of in my mind what we were trying to do with that plating, even if we aren't going to take it up. What's your thinking there? Should we kind of try to get the high level stuff in both of these yet today? Sure.
I guess I would just, for Matt, who's spent a lot of time on this, if there was things you guys saw, I think it would be a good time to just like, okay, hey, here's some things. Let's look at these things before we do the work session and at least give him some direction or give us some direction. That would be wonderful. And then we can do split. But that would be my thought. I don't know what your thought is.
That's what I had in mind. If that's helpful and people have looked at it enough to have those kind of comments. I'm fine with that.
Well, yeah. And I've got a question related to that. You mentioned about putting the word duplex in, a lot of that along with single family. And I guess the first question that popped into my mind, would that apply also to the family exemption that's allowed without any input from us or the board? So
What would it?
a lot of times, well, so let's say I've got a parcel that's over 35 acres.
Sure.
Legally, I could split 5 acres off for one of the kids. There's nothing, you just pro forma approve that once everything's in order. And so the uses that are allowed on that would be the zoning that is in place at the time. Does that, us changing that mean that I can do that family split and put a duplex on it if we just blanket use that language across the board? Or is there some, I am pretty familiar with family exemption stuff, so.
If it meets the box that the zoning puts it in. So like if it was ag and we said, yeah, you could do a duplex on it, if it went down to 5 acres through that exemption, then yeah, they could do that.
Okay.
And now if ag said, no, you can't, or whatever, then
Well,
you couldn't, or if it was residential, you couldn't, but.
So, I mean, you do need to be wary. There can be nothing in our zoning resolution which would prevent an otherwise lawful subdivision exemption.
Well, no, I'm not talking, I'm talking after the subdivision exemptions went through.
Yeah.
We're talking about the actual use.
Yeah,
after
it would stay ag, it would just be a non-conforming lot.
Well, correct, yeah. Yeah, I was just talking about the duplex, if you put the duplex on it, it's like,
Right.
yeah, as long as it meets the zoning criteria.
So if hearing no objections, I'd like to give Matt the opportunity to introduce his extensive package. And then
He's
let's-
standing at the podium.
Okay, and then let's do that for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes or whatever. And exactly what was suggested here is those who had a chance to go through it. There was some just general level, there's a lot of detail in there, but if there are big things like Mr. Hanning was remarking on, let's provide some feedback at the 30,000 foot level for a while here, and then we can do the same on the zoning and see how far we get. Does that work?
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, let's let you take the lead here, Mr. Ayers. What were you trying to do here? What do you think are the kind of the big pieces that, and anything that you think that could use just some top level policy direction from this board?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe as this commission has already heard me stand up and talk at you about, the impetus for really all of this was having a separate review for preliminary plat and then final plat. The more I looked into it, of course, the more strange it got. And due to the procedural timelines, which are in statute, and under my reading of statute, those are requirements which are placed on Planning and Zoning Commission and the board and not the subdivision applicant, those can't be really worked around. And we have to work this within our regulatory framework. A lot of other counties may not, but especially in the current environment that we are in, I think it is best to respect that. So starting off, I guess, chapter 1, some of these, such as, under section 2 purpose, those were, and as a little bit of background, David had a working document from 2020 that he was going through subdivision resolution, particularly with, I guess, our old county engineer. So I did pull some provisions from that, like under chapter 1, section 2, the purpose statements, section 3, I suppose, it's just suggested clarifying language. There were some statutory changes in the exemption statutes, which is 18.5, 303. Those changes are reflected. Obviously, just a lot of changes in capitalization, grammatical errors. And another big thing that we did was we went away from chapters being designated as Roman numerals, put those into Arabic numerals, and largely at David's request. And it does, I think, work a little better just for citation. There was also there were some points in our subdivision resolution where things were duplicative. You might see the same statutory provision twice in different places. So just kind of wanted to reorganize things like the penalties provisions. We had a penalty for platting under there originally. So I put that with the platting chapter and moved up the false statement or misrepresentation penalty, which is under the general subdivision chapter of 18.5, 300s, whereas platting is 34.12, 100s. Getting into definitions, just making things easier. The first, really anything in blue was something that I added just to carry over the statutory definitions, except a few things like board. Instead of writing out Board of County Commissioners every single time, you can just define that as board, makes things easier. Similar thing with Wyoming DEQ, which we can even change that to WYDEQ if we so chose, just for efficiency. Getting into platting requirements, I guess that first one under subparagraph A of section 2, originally that statutory language, I just changed it into language, which makes a lot more sense because I never liked that statutory language. A few other suggested clarifying language, just about the comprehensive plan to reflect changes in that statute. David suggested taking out rural addressing and just dealing that with the zoning certificate applications. So when there's that kind of final citing after subdivision permit. Just moving up some of the statutory requirements, which we have included. The amendment of recorded plats, those were suggestions from David, just to make things a little clearer. Vacation and replat of records. Again, just adding in some statutory language and cleaning up language.
And where you were adding statutory language, were there any places where it appeared you to be in conflict with what we had, or were you simply?
No, really,
fleshing it out?
So especially the 18.5.306, which is that minimum requirements for subdivision permits, that statute itself has been amended twice in the past 2 years. So we were just dealing with multiple versions ago is what our subdivision resolution was reflecting. And ultimately, if our subdivision regulations don't cover particular thing that's in 18.5.306, we still have to enforce that higher standard at a minimum. So I thought it's important to have that.
And I don't know that this needs to be more than a note for you, but because most of that relates to water, they're not done with that either, because this has been like a 5 or 6 year process that probably still has 2 or 3 more, because I know that they've been working some on one of the problems is conveyances that pass through a property. They're not recorded. They don't have to be recorded. So there's going to be more changes to that too, because that's essentially an easement by right rather than necessary to be recorded. So we're working on trying to get that figured out too, but you don't want to screw up what's already happened. So this whole process is kind of step by step.
Yeah, because last year's budget session amendments were only water rates.
Yeah.
But the year before, during regular or general session, it was much more than just water rates.
So would it be fair, did you find anything that was in conflict with state law in the whole works?
In our old provisions,
What you're offering to amend, are there any of your amendments that go to bringing us into compliance where we were not in compliance before?
yes, I would say that certainly under what was the old chapter 4 minimum requirements for a subdivision, there had been new there had been amended language. I think that was more requiring of a subdivider.
Yeah.
And ours were less requiring, just in terms of specificity, particularly, or,
Okay.
Particularly how you deal with existing water rights, and that it has to do with the state engineer, and you have to either determine how it's divided, or that you're abandoning it, or where it goes.
Well, that's always been in there, but I'm not sure
It
exactly.
was, and it's more of a problem in some other counties.
Oh, okay.
There are, in Goshen County in particular, there's a lot of water rights that are attached to subdivisions now that they have no provisions to use. And there's a whole bunch of other weird things that happen, whether it's a district or an individual right. And we don't have enough years left to do that.
Luckily, when we've dealt with water rights, a lot of them don't have water rights.
Yeah.
And then when they do, they just relinquish them. They give them back. We've never done any of the other options.
We're in a lot of the other, especially Goshen, Park County, why a lot of times on like 5 acres, they will actually go ahead and divide those up and allocate them to each parcel.
0.0007.
Yes.
It gets pretty ugly. Well, now that we've knocked you off your being there, the point that Commissioner Henning was making. State statute, as I understood, does not have a preliminary plat.
No, state statute envisions one plat.
So you have taken all these requirements and sprinkled them between the two, this preliminary plan thing. Give us the big picture.
Well, yeah, may I get to that? So, yeah, then, finishing out chapter 3, just a few more moving around statutory provisions into the appropriate places because those were specific. So chapter 4 is really where I suppose it starts to hit the substance of our purposes. And before, it was not clearly defined whether we would split out preliminary and final plat for review. There were provisions for a different preliminary and final plat, obviously, but I think just because state statute envisions it as being one plat, one application, our timelines did not recognize that. So the overview is that what this is proposing is there will be 2 stages for anything that's considered a major subdivision, being 4 lots into 4 lots or more. And for those, there will be separate processes with the preliminary plat and then what we have now termed the preliminary report. The preliminary report will basically require all of the information from 18.5306 and all of the additional requirements which were found in our previous versions, except for specific details of improvements, like when you see those road profiles, things like that, engineering coming through. Most importantly, it will not be going before Wyoming DEQ at that point. Because the Chapter 23 review, which we get from Wyoming DEQ, that is the catalyst for all of the timelines, particularly in front planning. So if we don't have that, then there isn't a subdivision permit application thus far. So after that preliminary review, where it goes through planning and zoning and the board, and then there are suggestions, critiques, requested changes made, it will then proceed to the permit for a subdivision application and accompanying final plat. And the trigger is once that DEQ review is included, then we actually have a subdivision permit application. So that's the language laying it out. Everything in chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, any of those changes are language from David and I. Same with chapter 5, which is showing the authority of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I kept the 45 days timeline just so it mirrors what would be required under the subdivision permit application. And after a discussion with Mr. Chair, I did add some language in where planning and zoning will have the opportunity to reduce any concerns that they have with the water supply study or water system study and sewage study from the initial review of the preliminary and final plat. You will then be able to reduce those concerns into writing and have that submitted with the application for the Chapter 23 review that the applicant is sending to DEQ. Also, some provisions for extending the timelines if it's based upon a mutual agreement of planning and zoning or the board and the subdivider. Okay, so then and before we had our minimum requirements for subdivision permits, which was just verbatim old statute. And then there were chapter 5, which was subdivision, basically requirements. And some of those were duplicative. So to me, it made the most sense, and especially to spell out this new process, to just get rid of all those from chapter 4 and merge that with a new chapter 5. So the rest of chapter 4 is pretty much gone.
But we see much of that in 4, in 5.
Yeah, that's so the new statutory language, which has replaced that language, will now be in chapter 5. And then we have, and that materials or public record, I moved that up from chapter 5. It made more sense to be in chapter 4 because that's more of kind of an administrative matter and disclaimer. And then we get into chapter 5, which is just the subdivision requirements. So as you can see, the preliminary plat, preliminary report, all of that preliminary plat language, except for the additions, was existing. We added a few things just to clarify, nothing too substantive. We also ran this by our county engineer, Jake Schneider, before submitting this to you with this packet. So we had a few changes, which I have commented on, such as changing, it to the FEMA firm 100-year delineation. And I'm sure that will make much more sense to specific members of this commission than myself. And then, so within 306, there are also requirements for what has to be stated on a plat, such as, no proposed central sewage system. So I moved those up from, I guess, more of the informational or substantive requirements to the preliminary plat, just for more clarity. And then we get to the preliminary report. So number 1, those were additional requirements. And also my suggestion, it kind of started out in our old ones. I believe that we kind of wanted our summaries of location, purpose, nature of the subdivision. And I just put that together into a new narrative summary of the proposal, in addition to the specific studies, which are also required. So number 2, that's from 185306. Number 3 is the sewage system study. And this, I guess particularly, Commissioner Hanning, this is where you had discussed during an earlier meeting of being able to require more information with applications. So this is where that would be done. So I think for the purposes of this commission subparagraph 3 and subparagraph 4 would really be where your policy determinations would come in. I just left it as the statutory language verbatim. But of course that could be added to as well. Water supply system study. I highlighted some suggested language just so it better matches, because it's odd. Statute and then chapter 23 of Wyoming DEQ's rules and regulations don't necessarily match up. So it's just kind of trying to cover both as much as possible in one fell swoop. Yes, and then those water rights changes. So subparagraph 6, geology. These were all additional requirements except for subparagraph D, which were carried over from our previous versions. And then there are also some additions based upon the review from Jake Schneider and also some language for David. Number 7, access. That something I think we would like you, or for this commission, to look at further. That is an old paragraph, or that is a requirement from our previous versions, which incorporates some requirements from 185306. But basically, I think everything after the first sentence was added by the county. And I know that that has gotten, that language has gotten the county into some litigation past, namely Bacon and Ivanhoe. Utilities, that is, well, so A is statutory, B is an additional requirement from our old regulations. And I can also send out what I've added a few more comments in here this morning to prepare for this meeting, and I can send that out as well. Financial insurance covenants or binding entity, those are all from statute. And then under this written certification acknowledgement, number 11, once again, that was where all of these sort of acknowledgements are tacked on to the end of specific requirements in 185306. I thought it would be easier just to put those all together at the end. And then we have our final plat subdivision permit. There's a final plat, pretty much just a little bit of remuneration, some of the adding of statutory language. Our old regulation, or well, our current regulations had terms such as no public water supply had to appear on the final plat if it was individual on-lot wells. Statute has changed to no proposed domestic water source, so I guess K and L would reflect that. Yeah, and then the subdivision permit application, which pretty much requires, the only additional thing that it requires is the Wyoming DEQ report on the sewage and water system, and also the details of improvement, which were currently there. We changed the term, and the distinction between minor subdivisions or small subdivisions. That was previously in chapter 4. We moved that down to chapter 5. So basically all of section 1 and 2, those will be the requirements for a major subdivision. The minor subdivision, we changed from small to minor based off of some syntactical suggestions of Mr. Gerch. Some of this language was changed, which I have highlighted where that was changed.
What? Sorry to, you're on a roll right now, but what is the state statutory requirement? Is there any distinction made there as to the number of lots?
Yes, so I didn't bring all of the papers, which I should have. My apologies. But 185301, or sorry, 185306, you can exempt by or the county can exempt by regulation almost all of the requirements which are in that statute for the subdivision of 1 or more units of land into not more than a total of 5. So they've actually raised that ceiling. I just kept it at 3 because that's what we had before. That would be obviously a policy determination for this commission. But we can't go up to 5 for that minor or formerly small subdivision process. And you can pretty much do anything in subparagraph A and subparagraph C, which I guess leaves you with B, so subdivision always has to get review and recommendations from Conservation District. Yeah, so that's an interesting change. Similarly, the large acreage subdivisions, there were some changes in those as well, I believe in statute, but this is verbatim what statute is, because interestingly enough, even though you can generally require more restrictive requirements, under the subdivision permit applications, if you are to regulate at all large acreage subdivisions, then it has to be exactly under statute. You don't have any leeway on that. And that's our proposition.
That's it. Yeah, it seems so simple. Well, I certainly echo, but that's accepted. There's a lot of work here. It's just getting the words right. And I think it's great that somebody just starts at the top of these and goes clear through, because they've just accumulated baggage over the years. So I hope I'm not insulting the planning office, but as I've asked Mr. Gerich, he'll say, oh yeah, that came from bowling back in '07, and this came from over here. So yeah, this is what we should be doing periodically. The one comment that you and I discussed a little bit earlier was this issue of the preliminary and the final. And I had some concern that the point of a sequential phased process is to save the applicant a lot of effort if it's a loser. So we do the zoning, and if you don't get the zoning change, you've wasted your time hiring somebody to do all your planning and everything. And people ought to know that early on. So as between the preliminary and the final, I'm wondering if there's some things on the preliminary side that would more appropriately be dumped over on the final side. Now, maybe I'm thinking of it too broadly as these kind of two piles. And immediately what came to mind was Commissioner Kennedy, because I do a lot of that work for those water rights. I'd ask somebody to sort out all of their water rights on that preliminary thing. Maybe going too far, because it can get so tedious. And then the drainage is the other one that, again, just intuitively, when we read those reports that Jake puts together for us, it seems like there's just a whole lot of hydraulic calculations and things that aren't going to be a decision point for us of whether to go ahead with it or not. Maybe we spare them that and try to put in that first pile the things that might be showstoppers. So I don't have enough experience to know where that falls, but I just like the idea of helping our applicants out by giving them some preliminary.
I would agree with that, other than what work is it appropriate for the county engineer to review during preliminary so that things are correct for the final?
Yeah.
That would be my other side of that is we have a pretty limited time frame when we're looking at when the final starts to come to us. So we're almost forced into a corner of we have to allow the applicant more time, because we have a fairly short window there where we have to say yes, or it's yes by default.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was essentially what I defined a subdivision permit application as, or a complete subdivision permit application. Preliminary plan report with all changes or revisions based upon any review thereof, as well as the final plat, and any other documentation or materials required for the subdivision proposal itself. So.
And I could see a scenario with a major subdivision where an applicant might choose to have more than just a month between the preliminary and then the final, so that they make sure that all those other items, the water rights, for example, are dealt with, because that's really dependent on the state engineer and the board of control, which is almost out of their control how quickly they can get to something.
The board of control only meets like once a quarter, right?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't make a decision. I mean, which we still go forward with those even when that hasn't been determined.
And that's kind of
But-
pushing the
But the
envelope
state
the way
doesn't
that's
like
worded.
that. So, yeah.
That's a statutory requirement. Which
Yeah.
has to be there in
Sure.
order for a subdivision permit to be issued. And I'll just as, one point, may I, Mr. Chair?
Sure. No, this is
Okay.
just an open
Oh,
discussion.
all right, thank you. Yeah, I try to abide by the rules, but the way I structured it, because really under that preliminary and final plat, or preliminary plat and preliminary report, it is just recommendations at that point. And I think we would run into a few different legal quagmires if we were to outright deny something on the preliminary stage. So I gave them the ability to continue to bring something forward, even if it is recommended for denial by this commission and the preliminary plat and report is denied by the board. I mean, theoretically, they could fix that, come forward with something final, because it's ultimately based on that review. Which is also the same way that I saw it structured in other counties.
Yeah, and there are those interviews and things. I mean, you guys work with them. Maybe that addresses my concern. When somebody comes in and you help them get all their ducks lined up and flag things that just don't look like they're gonna ever ripen.
Well, and I think, to a prudent person, that would kind of be a signal, but.
There's an assumption.
Find one of those good people. All right, then just another quick one, and then we could move on on the DEQ business. So their chapter 23 requirements are go on, and they got little models, things they have to do. Those would all come to us just as they were going to send it to DEQ, but they wouldn't send it to DEQ.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Because once they do that, then it starts the time.
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't understand. Other just general questions of what we're trying to do here. So then I'm thinking it might be the best way to proceed is we feed comments to you. I mean, I don't know if we need to just completely stop and do the other one, but I know I've gone through it, just lots of little, what about this? Maybe change this. Would that be appropriate to just, everybody just kind of feeds it to you as the collector of comments, and then you come back to us with some thoughts? Or do we have to do that?
My preference would be to do that during the work session.
Okay.
Because that's where, okay, we've all had time to make our own edits, and it makes sense to go through from start to finish and discuss those as a group and just come up with a final rather than forcing him to have to collate everything.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be easier for staff if we just don't overburden them with everyone's comments, but we make all of our own notations, come to the work session, we iron everything out. If we don't have agreement, we can put in alternates, and then that's what would go out to the public for our public hearing.
I guess what I was trying to do there was also in deference to staff, so that staff has time to think about it instead of, maybe I'm just kind of a slow thinker. If you give me a new idea on the fly, and I'd like to have thought about it a little bit, could we balance that? So
I see the value in that, but I guess
Realistic.
my word would be use discretion. If it's something that requires some staff research in any kind of depth, yeah, it's reasonable to say, hey, I've got a question about this, but where there's, other things that aren't quite as big, like, like.
Rail ties also before the Supreme Court right now. So just a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucky
You have something else to do, is that?
Yeah, it's a big one.
So let's leave it at, if there's things that we're just confused by, that it would be good to have you come to us prepared to answer, then let's share those. And then you could spend as much or as little time on it as you want. Is that kind of?
Yeah.
Split the difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Stein, go ahead.
I wanted to add that first, I think it's a really good outline. Thank you for explaining it, Counselor. I can see you put a lot of time and work into it. So that made a lot of sense to me. I appreciate the detailed explanation. I think I'm with Commissioner Kennedy that most of this, I think most of the comments can be dealt with in a work session in that context. There may be a few issues that we want to bounce back to staff because it's a little deeper question. But in this particular version, I didn't see a lot of it. I think, the explanation for how you've arranged things, bringing things together, what has to be by statute, to me, makes a lot of sense. And the document makes a lot more sense to me now. So I believe most of the comments are going to be a work session type of thing. Okay, we just hammer this out, done, boom, move on, and get done. And I think that's what serves the public. The other comment I wanted to make was just, I appreciate that we're trying to make this easier for people, but at the same time, if I'm doing a major subdivision, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for these things ahead of time. Because once DEQ and that clock starts ticking, there's very little time. And that's unfair to that developer, to me anyway. It's kind of unfair to them. I've only got this many days and you asked me for this big thing that's going to take longer because the professionals are backed up or it just can't be done that fast, or water rights questions, for instance, things like that. I'd rather see all that front loaded into the preliminary. So that when the clock starts running, they have a reasonable expectation of how fast that decision will be made. And if there's anything at that point that needs to be taken care of, I think 45 days is an adequate amount of time for that. At least I would defer to staff in terms of what their experience has been if they've seen things come up like that. And I think that's what this document reflects in a lot of ways, is all that experience in having done this a lot. So those were the comments I wanted to make.
So are we comfortable proceeding on that basis? Okay.
If it's okay to email you just general questions about whether an idea I'm pursuing is illegal. So like that, statute, can I just fire off a question to you about whether something is not doable?
Yeah, and phone calls are also appreciated.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no written record.
Well, it's also, it's,
I'm joking.
sometimes you can just do it more efficiently.
I'm a transparent person, so.
Oh, yeah.
But at any rate, okay. Phone calls
Sometimes
is
it's a
fine,
little
'cause
easier
then
to
that's
talk
like,
things
then you
through.
don't gotta compose in.
Yeah.
It's, I understand, okay.
And all three of these guys are very open about just, is this a really stupid idea or not?
Yeah.
Verbally, rather than have to write it down. Martin, that's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah, and I'll leave a few business cards on the table.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Should we give a pass through the zoning piece?
Or, well, should we set,
Or do you want to set that?
Essentially.
Okay, so yeah, let's bring that to a close. What? The suggestion that Mr. Kennedy made was that we would have a work session followed immediately by
Our regular meeting. And just for the public's ability to comment. So we have a work session, we have our regular meeting, And at the next regular meeting would be the public hearing on what was developed during the work session.
Public hearing being at the end of the 30 days, public hearing.
Well, I think at that next meeting, if it is in a final place where we want it to be, that was when you set it for notice of
Yeah.
the public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's, I'm looking for some space between the work session and the, this is what we want to do meeting.
Yeah.
So you're just saying those are butted up against each other for time convenience and schedule, not because it's the same topic.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm sympathetic to that. Others?
I unfortunately made travel arrangements that have already been canceled and rebooked and canceled and rebooked, you know, like what you read about on the news. And so I attempted to avoid missing the next meeting, but now with these dual cancellations, I won't be able to attend the next meeting. But I'm comfortable giving my comments to somebody else, so like a proxy or whatever.
And would move in the meeting make a difference? We're not standard today.
Right. Well, I guess I asked these guys because it bumps them up against the county commission meeting in a kind of an awkward way. And I'd love to move the meeting so I could attend, but I don't want to create more havoc with how it really puts them on a close turnaround time with county commissions.
Yeah, although this wouldn't be, well, the other parts, the other things
Other
would-
regular meeting items, unless you just separate the two and have them separate. But I'm happy to do whatever makes the most sense for everybody here, you know. Who knows, maybe my flight will get canceled again and I'll be here.
The 10th is-
Well, I did get back from Portland.
You made it. You're always ready to
Which
get a car and drive.
actually, the reason I was had to get off was they actually changed me to a shorter. I had a layover in between and it was a later departure. They bumped me up a little bit earlier and it was a direct, yeah.
Wow,
but,
that's a rare story.
It makes you kind of nervous so when they change it like an hour before you're ready to go.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm flexible.
So just to put it out there, next month would not be an issue with Board of County Commissioners. We wouldn't be able to get anything on the second meeting anyways.
oh, just because of the way the Tuesdays fall.
Correct.
And I'm not averse to a separate session, although I like the idea of this is P and Z day. Others, thoughts?
We could also put the zoning district amendment changes before, if we wanted to do that, quest, you know,
Oh, well, yeah, sorry.
because these will definitely be more lengthy.
Well, yeah, all right, let's go back to that thought and run the zoning ones to the end. So let's hold off on the special session for this anyway. No, thank you, Mr. Harris. We just kind of followed down that thought. Does that work? Okay, so let's hold that thought. Read the piece, get your comments organized, and then we'll declare the session open at some later date. We hope not too much later. We have to capture all the thinking you've done before it leaks out the edges. All right, are we square there? Let's talk about zoning for a minute.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, I give us a quick overview similarly. By way of introduction, this started last year and it was, it's always a good time to go back through your regulations. Those haven't been looked at for quite a long time, but it started when council brought to our attention the new state statute with regard to how zoning and comp plans interface. The recommendation at the time, which has been carried through in these statements that we saw this morning, was that what we had been doing previously just did not work. I appreciate Commissioner Hanning's response at the time, which was, let's not throw away the old one until we have something new to replace it with. And that's part of what moved me forward, as well as several lawsuits that the county's been involved in that deal with this. So I think it is timely that we try to straighten out our zoning resolution and bring it into conformity with state statute. And much of that is terminological, and there's been helpful saying, okay, state statute uses the terms amendment, let's call it an amendment. There's several of those. The state statute uses the term land use or physical development. So you'll see that in the draft here that we use those terms. Starting today, you heard me emphasizing zoning district. That's from our rules, but I think that concept of a zoning district captures the fact that zoning is not a specific land use. It's a class of uses. The brown one was a great example. Commercial covers everything under the sun. And so it's a reminder that if you assign a piece of ground to a zoning district, you're not approving a 14-lot subdivision, a porn store, a cow station, or whatever it happens to be. So that's a distinction I tried to bring through there. And then zoning certificate, that's an interesting one because there are zoning certificates specifically mentioned in state statute, separately from the state statutes that authorize us to do planning and zoning that pertinent there too. So that's probably the first kind of bright line that I was trying to do with these suggestions, is to clearly put planning and zoning on one side of the line and development standards, individual plats and specific land uses developments over on the other side of that. Once that line is properly drawn, then we find planning and zoning are on the same side of the line, and we can proceed to honor the statutory language and obvious logic of what you see in state statute, like planning and zoning commission may prepare and amend a comprehensive plan, including zoning. Local land use plans may guide local governments in adopting or amending local zoning regulations. Then on the other side of the line are those specific developments like a duplex in a commercial zone. And then the process for verifying that a particular project is consistent with the zoning. And that's why we statute 18.5.203 that kind of got interleaved in some of these briefs that we've been seeing. So I think we can honor the statutory provisions with respect to zoning certificates and keeping folks, giving them the assurance that if they're compliant with their zoning district, they can proceed. And this has been a big issue. It really was the substance of several of the lawsuits of you can't tell me my gravel pit is out of line based on a comp plan. You can tell me my gravel pit's out of line because I'm in a residential zone, but you have to establish the zone first. So that's that really in a nutshell is what I was trying to do, was get those two concepts nailed down, the precise verbiage that we had put together. Okay. So a very short introduction. If we're agreed on those two concepts, then it's just a question of whether the words that have been suggested capture them correctly or appropriately and most importantly legally. So comments on just what we're up to, like capturing the sense of the commission. Okay, I see nodding heads. Then what I would like to do is to have Mr. Ayers go through it carefully. He hasn't had a lot of time with things. He's done a lot of other things, and just make sure that we have drawn those lines correctly with respect to statute and case law. And then I guess he and I could work on a next draft, which then we could submit to a page by page work session. Does that work?
Did we not want to go just straight into
Yeah, I would say let's,
Or just go for it.
Go to
because I
Yeah.
already have some
yeah,
suggestions.
Okay,
of your
so
opinion,
let us-
but it was just with the 24-hour turnaround.
Yeah, well, you're a whiz, so sure, if everybody's willing to let's just start. Let me find my markup.
Should we try to pull this up on our Zoom here, to look at?
Sure. I think everybody
We
here
have all,
has it.
That's fine.
we've all got it.
I think everybody here probably has it.
We're gonna quickly finding one's place. I guess if you've used my pagination, then that's the trouble with this. You add a bunch of stuff and page 3.2 is 3.2 anymore. But all right, let's dive in and maybe we'll learn something about our earlier question. I'll just go page by page. The first red I see is what's marked as page 2-3. And here I've adopted that language about what we mean by land use. And then fair enough, it is somewhat counterintuitive to say rural residential isn't the land use. But what we're trying to do here, we're going to call the land use a 3.2 acre lot subdivision. Or not, and we're going to call the zoning district something not a land use or physical development. So we just flip through these and take comments, and then everybody who's got anything, pitch in. The zoning certificate. Search for glasses here. Similarly, just trying to pin down some of the language there. And I wondered if we should add a definition of development standards. The other thing, as I read through it, there were various terms that I thought might want to come back into the definitions section. So keep your eye out for those. Did you say something?
Yeah, on the zoning certificate, I guess my question is, where is a variance noted then on that particular certificate, or is that noted on the later documents?
The zoning certificate, what that is a little vexing. That's mostly what rail tie is over. So, Mr. Gersh, do you have
Like,
because, yeah, I mean, there's the zoning certificate, but then there's also conditional use permits,
right.
Variances.
I mean, the only thing it says in statutes is that they need to show that they're complying with the zoning is a zoning certificate. I mean, it kind of generalizes it that much, you know.
So it says you are compliant with whatever, and that whatever could include variances and conditions and everything else. Okay.
So catch all that for.
And I guess that was a more general question that I had for Matt is how much litigation is there out there that might require us to change anything in this zoning ordinance or anything else? And kind of what's the timeline too that we expect on the various litigation that's out there right now?
And the good thing is all the litigation in the state's happening in Albany County right now, so.
I realize that.
We'll know that.
And we just got a new judge too. So.
Right. Now's the time to get this straight down.
Well, so that's more for what the petitioners are saying for rail tie is that because our regulations are not clear enough about it, that ConnectGen needed a WECS permit, wind energy conversion system permit, and a conditional use permit. So they needed both of those. Obviously, what we're saying is that WECS permit is a conditional use permit. It's just more specific than general conditional use permit. And then there's also then the question of, is there a zoning certificate afterwards once, final siting, final engineering and all that is done?
And that's what it says in the rules, I think, is that it requires a certificate before they go forward with the construction stuff.
Yeah, it's just not, the most clearly
No, absolutely
defined.
not.
Yes, well, and I didn't play with that much, but you're talking about section 6. Maybe we ought to do some work there. Is that the suggestion to make it clear what goes where? I was trying not to do
I don't
correct
know.
every possible error.
I don't
Probably
have
should
a
wait for the-
fix at the front of my mind. I would. I mean, if Judge Crick can obviously rule in our favor on that point, I think that the conditional, yeah, it's, I guess, it could be more clearly defined what the zoning certificate actually accomplishes. I've seen a lot of other counties' regulations, they just don't even use that term, zoning certificate.
But that term is used in state statutes.
It's the statutory language, yeah.
So they use, more specific permits or, because there are times, like David, if I were to, if someone's building their house, it's proper under zoning, it's got the proper setbacks, you just rubber stamp it once you get the information. So it's not always. Yeah.
It's not always a matter for review by the commission or for the board.
Most often not.
Well, we see not always.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we don't see those.
Really,
Right.
yeah, because really what happens is that, the fight will be over a conditional use.
They get approved and they consent agenda. They get like
Well,
a list.
They're already approved.
Right.
But we send it to the board for their
There's like a
to
list.
look at.
Yeah.
So did you put rail tie in that list when they came through? I mean,
Well, they went through the
I
board.
mean, it was on the minute, in the minute.
right, so it's still, so it doesn't matter whether, you're still a zoning certificate. I mean, that's the thing that's confusing is here you are trying to separate out the development from the zoning, and we have them both here. Land use or physical development, both get a zoning certificate.
Say that again.
Okay,
Oh,
so
no, never mind, I'm getting it mixed up myself. You're trying to separate out the planning and zoning from the land use and development.
yes.
So this is consistent, sorry, I'm getting punchy.
Okay, so to your point, Kennedy, you think that we need to work on the language for zoning certificate or let that wait until some of this other stuff plays out? I didn't do anything, except just give it a definition.
I think they're so that it's clear to applicants and to all of us. I think there has to be some mention that there may also be appropriate conditional use and approved variances. I'm struggling to wing it on the language, but
This you could just add to what you have there, the
Yeah.
land use or physical development,
Yeah, and
including and not limited to variances and
And-
additional use permits.
I look at the work session as the wordsmithing, and we're
Right.
just looking through ideas and trying to think about the things we should be thinking about.
Variances have their own thing, right?
Well, variance is a written application, so it's almost permanent at that point.
Added in.
Okay,
But
Okay, so let's flag that for some massage, maybe.
It seems to me like we're missing some definitions. And I think that's what Commissioner Kennedy is wrestling with is, we don't have a definition in here of commercial use permit. We don't have a roadmap for somebody. That's what I'm hearing anyway, because, what's the certificate? How do you get the certificate? How does it work? Does it replace a conditional use permit? You don't have to apply for one now. I kind of need a flow chart, is one term, and putting like variance isn't defined in here. And I know that may sound silly, but you're trying to use words that aren't defined, so that becomes difficult because different people will see that word different. And somebody will you don't want to get in a situation where a litigant goes to state code and says, oh, I found this definition and you guys meant that definition, too bad. Now I've got a court case to go because I've got state or in Wyoming federal or, that sort of thing. So I think that might be one place to start. And I do think in the work session, it's easier to call those things out and just put in a pencil and say, here, stick this in too. And also, I think just respecting Mr. Ayers' time, it's better to point these things out to him, let him come back and, try and remedy any deficiencies.
Okay, so let's put zoning certificate as something that needs more work. That's the moral of this little story, and to try to make it clear to people what it is, what it is not process. But I'm turning the page to zoning map. Again, this I hope was just a clarification, and it speaks to the an issue that came up with the aquifer zoning is the map really isn't the final words to where the line is. The surveyors are the final word. You don't even need a zoning map. You can do the whole thing in narrative. So the point here was just to make it clear that that map was the graphical depiction of where those zoning districts fell. And then just to kind of clear, it's the real deal. Okay.
So I do have a comment on this. So you talk about each parcel. So and this carries over into some of your other changes. There are parcels in the county where there's more than one zoning in. I'll give you a couple of one instance is that we have there's a large agricultural property that's south of town, and some folks leased a portion of that property to do some logging on, or a logging business. Not really logging, but
Lumber mill.
Yeah. So Keith, you're around for that.
Yeah.
We changed that portion of that property to industrial. So there's that situation. The other situation I could bring up is, so we had the Vista Buttes subdivision. Well, they wanted to, they subdivided it, and before they subdivided it, they changed the zoning. Well, they changed the zoning to two different zone types. So it was one parcel, they changed it to two different zoning designations, and then they did the subdivision within those zoning designations. So a part of it was commercial and a part of it was rural residential. So it wasn't exactly just a parcel. It wasn't following survey lines for a parcel.
How'd you draw the line? How was the line?
A survey was provided.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
You approved one last year
Okay.
that was like this.
So then
There's one in the pike that's like this.
Yeah.
So, or a formal survey or something. What's the, yeah, it doesn't have to be a parcel, but
Sure.
the point here is
Sure, yeah.
you need a survey line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That was the thing I was trying to capture.
I mean, if we wanted to, we could say that, but it makes it difficult for these unique situations, you know?
Yeah. Then the concept we're trying to capture is there's a line, and if you really want to know where the line is, that's known.
It's not just a picture. It's not just a picture on a map. There is a legal.
Yeah.
Legal description is probably a better
Legal
term.
description, yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Okay. And then we have the different zoning districts, which, as we talked earlier, I suggest that was a second pass, but other counties, as we've all looked at, will have lots of these. So we have a multifamily zone district that isn't necessary for our purpose. So I was defer that. Official zoning maps then are, I'm at section 4, same issue that we've just had, and so that would probably be amenable to the previous comments.
Before we go completely past there, maybe it is reasonable to add another category, whether that is multifamily or another common designation. Some places is what's called planned unit development, where essentially they say we're going to have this mix of these uses on this property, and here is where these various uses are.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of other zoning districts that we can create.
Well, and I guess the question for us is what would be most useful for what we see in the somewhat foreseeable future? In other words, if we don't revisit this for 10 years, what would we wish that we had done?
I have another suggestion for getting at this issue, would be to just change the land use table for these different residential, smaller residential things to conditional. That way, I mean, because there are probably going to be some lots where the idea of having a 4-unit multifamily thing in a sensitive area would like horrify us, right? And not be something we would think would be a good idea in terms of maybe the volume 4 households would be discharging into a septic tank each building. But if you made it so that the land use table allowed it to be a conditional thing, then on a case-by-case basis, maybe it's like, oh, this is really close to the city. The chances of it being annexed and put on the sewer eventually are high. I mean, you can make a case-by-case decision about the condition. I guess you still got your requirements for how to grant a conditional use permit, but that's just another way to potentially go after this.
You would add it as a conditional use permissible within a small lot residential, say.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the downsides are. I'm just throwing it out as another way of attacking.
We would have to change some of the other language in there, because like in our zoning district, I think it says we allow 1 dwelling.
Yep.
So we'd have to remove some of that, and not that that's that difficult.
Right.
But there's just, we'd have to
Unless
look
that's
through.
addressed with the conditional use. Yes. Would that be like a variance type thing?
Well, we would have to add some language in that district to say that, or if a conditional use is provided or something like that, or.
Yeah. Following up on Keith's thoughts, there are 2 basic ways to go at it. One way is to modify the existing districts to allow conditional use to really anymore. That's perfectly fine. Or we could create some new zoning districts. We could create a zoning district for duplexes and one for multifamily.
And I guess my thought there is, I'm not a great fan of conditional use permits, especially on residential. I think I like to see clarity so that an applicant knows what they need to do and what they can expect, rather than having a conditional use allowed so that they spend time, effort, and money, and then have it be a decision that could vary from board to board, and God forbid Matt has to go back to court again, because we don't have something clearly delineated as to what the requirements are with the conditional use. And I prefer some clarity there rather than your approach. Yeah.
Commissioner Hanning, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
No,
In the discussion with Commissioner Hinckley, you said that, Lincoln County, for anything multifamily, they just automatically require an septic. So you can also kind of maybe alleviate some of your concerns
Right.
in that sense.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, my reaction, maybe I'm being.
I need a break for a minute.
Oh, please. Yes, there's that. Let's take a recess for 5 minutes.
you this or you need to do this. Ready to roll. Jeff, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, then we're ready to proceed. All right, the thought I was going to throw out was to try to confine this round to this issue of the two pieces. Recognizing that we could work the individual zoning districts at some length. Both how many we have and what's inside each one of them. I guess my suggestion would be that we do that in a whole different path, but it's your show. What's the pleasure of the board?
Strictly, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to reverse what I said to you earlier. I would like to see us go forward with this that you're working on now and do it all at one fell swoop. Because I think we need to do it.
Other zoning districts.
Yes. And I think, right now we're talking about two.
Mm-hmm.
If other commissioners have some others they might want to add, that's fine too, obviously. But otherwise, it's just two. And I think we can do that.
Those two being
Multifamily and duplexes.
others, thoughts on whether we want to undertake defining some new zoning districts? Mr. Gertz.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that would be, that could take a lot of staff time too. Just, there's a lot that goes into the land uses and those types of things. I guess if we just did in the meetings, it wouldn't be a big deal, but we've got the two big plans that are kind of making their way through the process, which are going to have regulatory amendments that are proposed that we'll probably see, once those are approved or if they're approved or whatever. So I don't know. What we're looking at now is just kind of, we're cleaning some things up. We're making it clear, separating these processes, which shouldn't be a huge deal, Once you start getting into those other things, that's where it could be a huge deal. There could be a lot of things we need to change, could be a lot of time we have to take. I mean, maybe not, but I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I guess a question I'd have for you, would it be easier then for staff if we made specific mention of allowed uses in certain zones then? For example, duplex and multifamily.
I mean, if we're looking at one use specifically, I don't think that's a huge deal. But if we're gonna go through the whole land use chart.
Because I was just thinking of what we dealt with tonight of the commercial zoning where, you know, and that's something for us to think about before the work session is, where is it, what zones is it appropriate for us to just automatically grant a duplex? So that we don't have to rezone something into commercial to allow a duplex. And
But where would you put those?
well, that's the item to discuss here too.
Well, the
So
urban is the most contemplated for being annexed and hooked on to services.
Well, I'll say again, I don't remember if I said it earlier in the evening or not, but what we talked about together. I went and compared zoning resolutions with our sister county, Laramie County, and they have specific provisions for duplexes in several of their residential zoning districts. And the comparable ones for us would be rural residential, small lot residential, and urban residential, where we could add 4 duplexes, every place where you see single family residence. And that would match their language, you know, as close as it can, given the difference in distance we have. I don't think it's a big lift. I don't think we have to change anything else, actually. I may be wrong, because I'm not Matt, and I'm not David.
Yeah, I mean, I would oppose that, for example. And so we'd have to have a discussion about it. And we could do that. But I see that as,
We have to change the definition of dwelling, but
yeah,
but you're doubling the densities. I mean, I guess that's my reaction to the idea of just blithely saying duplexes are okay, is that's like saying second dwellings are okay in terms of the load on the land, which is what zoning's all about. So again, we can have that discussion. The threshold question before us now is, do we want to have that discussion as part of these zoning changes?
my own opinion is that we're gonna see, given where construction costs are, we're gonna see a lot more of that. And whether that is, whether that's a single, are we gonna look at this as a single family residence that has mother-in-law addition on it? Or where do we cut the line on all that? And that's a discussion we need to, I think we need to have sooner rather than later, because I think we'll see more of that.
Okay, I've heard mixed reactions. You're sympathetic to that, Ms. Hanning?
I agree that we're likely, you see that at the city level, right? That you're seeing more housing going up that is multifamily, because it's a better bottom line for the developer to be able to afford doing that. Yeah, this doesn't sound like it's an easy fix, is because you're right, you got the increased density issue. Yeah. So it sounds like it would take more time than maybe we have.
Well, we've got a work session
To hammer it. Maybe we could get it a little further down the road and know that we're gonna fail or succeed.
well, I'll offer one thought. I mean, this might not fly at all because I'm new here, but to me, we can make these changes and the commissioners can look at it, approve or deny them, but it's not anything we can't reverse if it's just horribly wrong, you know?
Well, and
Or we can sort of sit here and just like,
perhaps a compromise position on that is we incorporate that into the urban and I can't remember the other one that we just mentioned, but not the small lot residential. In other words, that way we've said, yes, you can do this with a duplex, but you have to be at least a 5-acre lot. So we place it in that particular zone, not just blanket in all of them.
And then just change up some of our definitions.
Yeah.
Because right now with duplex, would a wholesale be considered a multifamily dwelling?
Yeah.
Under our definitions.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, let's try to reduce that threshold question. Are we going to try to get inside the individual zoning districts if this pass? I'm opposed. Mr. Kurtz suggests it's a bunch of work. I hear two voices saying, yes, let's do it. Ms.
I
Hanning.
can think of more districts that would make you crazy. A wind district. Nobody wants to do that right now.
Well, we can do all kinds of districts.
Well, my own opinion is just to work on some of those definitions within the current districts rather than to create new districts.
So
So
can we
that it's a-
expand the land use within the
Yes.
current district?
Going along with that thought also, if we're thinking ahead, what's likely to come before us in the county, what kind of development's going forward, duplexes are also gonna come up again and again and again. About half the construction going right now for family residential in the city is duplexes.
Yeah, but my resistance is in any way related to whether this is an important issue or something that could be corrected. It's just to try to do this in bite-sized pieces and not get distracted into changing our zoning districts to do other things. But I guess again, my mission is just, let's get this division between the two pieces put together. And then while we're at it, we can do any number of things. So again, I'm hearing kind of mixed signals. Mr. Thine, you want to weigh in on that issue? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah, I'm of a nature to say, for instance, on the duplexes, we know this is going to be an issue, so we should deal with that issue. And you've had a couple suggestions about how to deal with that issue. I'm more leaning toward explicitly saying these existing areas can have a duplex, or whatever language you need to accomplish that. Rather than create a plethora of new districts. I mean, if we come against something where we can't fit it in an existing district, that's a separate question to me. That means, we got to have a new district. But I haven't seen that yet. I'm sure between the 5 of us or 8 of us, we could think of a few examples, but I don't think that's the most efficient way to proceed. I think the efficient way to proceed is things. The question was, what can you see in the next 10 years? And that's what I kind of go back to is what can we see in the next 10 years? What can we really expect in Albany County? I think you can expect duplexes for the reasons Commissioner Kennedy elucidated. You've already seen it in the city, as Commissioner Hanning said. Okay, good. We need to deal with that. Nuclear power plants are probably not on the list. At least at this moment in time. And in my mind, that would be commercial anyway. Just let me say that one came up, small modular plants. But I think, see how far we get on trying to fix the things that are obvious. So that's where I'm coming from.
I guess I'm hearing a consensus that we want to expand our mission here to include some accommodation of multifamily housing. All right, so bring your ideas for that to the next work session. Okay, fair enough.
If you like to have side discussions.
Sure, and as long as we don't get together in 3 summits, you're welcome to discuss it with whoever you.
Yes, specific word change might need for dwelling units. I also always recommend looking to other counties for not reinventing.
Yeah. Well, look at Teton County. You want to see zoning districts.
Except for Teton.
Don't look there.
Cool. Well, that plan is just insane.
Okay, all right. That's how the board wishes to be. We'll just see that in the commission. All right. Back to the document. I'm over on the 3-6 on my printing, initiation of a change in the zoning district. And to which a parcel is assigned. Now, again, that's a little bit wordy, but the point was to try to really break out the idea of a zoning district is different than something that might be called a zoning change in lots of different ways. That's all that was about. And then some of this was what needs to be provided to us needs to be consistent with that. We should not ask for a plat. That isn't part of this zoning change. That's a specific use. So I'm deleting that down at the bottom of the page. Keeping the application separate, to not have the zoning change come in with a development application. Is the idea there. And then I got inside the findings, and some of that's just syntax to make those all affirmative findings. And sometimes they get worded in like they're just a notification. You have to do screening and buffering, I think was in here somewhere. That thing I'm suggesting should just be deleted because screening and buffering is a specific development. And I guess my red line is indicate that, but my suggestion here would be to talk about screening and buffering. So let's see, what are the rest of those? The wording, the proposed zoning change meets the following criteria. And to make it clear that what we're asking for there is demonstration that those are acceptable impacts. I think Ms. Hanning has brought up the point that there are always impacts, economic impacts. The question isn't, are there any? The question is, are they acceptable? So the idea was to recast this grammatically to where we need an affirmative finding that the impacts, economic impacts, cultural impacts, road, everything else are acceptable, rather than tacitly leaving the thought that any impacts are unacceptable. And Paula, if anything here caught your attention. And then the final piece there was to make it clear that a failure of the applicant to provide sufficient information to support the finding means that you can deny it. The way this is set up, not now, but all or before, is the burden is on the applicant to come to the permitting authority and demonstrate to the permitting authority's satisfaction that it meets these criteria. So the point there, just to make it clear, that if we aren't saying the economic impacts are unacceptable, we may simply be saying we don't know enough to find that they are acceptable. Okay, that's those changes. Yeah. If anything caught anybody's attention, holler.
Can we table a conditional use request?
This is strictly zoning. These are requests to change the zoning. There are no variances, there are no conditional uses. Is that what you're asking about?
Well, I'm just reading 14, and I seem to remember that we didn't have the option to table things because of the statutory time limit. But maybe that's alleviated by now having 2 steps to the process. I wasn't clear.
So may answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not following. But
yeah, so Shithine, in the process that we've outlined in our regulations currently, we have 45 days from the time we receive that, planning and zoning receives that. So you could table it one time and then come back and, because it'll be within 45 days of your next meeting, and then make a decision. You can do that one time, basically.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Sorry if I was hitting the wrong direction. So that's in a different section when we're talking conditional uses. There are no time constraints on this process. Is that correct?
Well,
No.
We've included it. So in chart 5.1 or whatever, it's included in there. But if we do take it out, then it wouldn't have a time limitation. And the time limitation is something we just adopted based on the platting and subdivision regulations. So we've done it to ourselves basically. So we don't have to do that, but it just makes us make a decision at some point. So
well, and that was my suggestion. We strike zoning district amendments from that chart. Sure. Now, do we want to have timelines attached to zoning district amendments?
Yes, because there's without any such restriction, the commission and the board can simply just hold it in abeyance, and that,
Right.
in my mind, that violates the spirit of the rest of the statutes and preliminary and final plat, going specifically to subdivision. People need to have some assurance that there will be a decision made in a certain amount of time, not just, oh, let's table this for, because we don't like it, why we're just gonna table it.
I just, all right, I'll flag that as one. Let's bring suggestions forward at our work session for attaching a timeline to this process. There are no statutory requirements.
So there are statutory timelines for notice. That's under 825-202. The Planning and Zoning Commission may prepare and amend a comprehensive plan, including zoning, for the promotion of health, safety, and most general welfare. Before certifying its plan and amendments thereto, the commission shall hold one public hearing. Notice must be published at least 30 days before the date of the hearing. So we have to have that, but there's no, I guess on the back end, there's not, because there's no statutory provision for a change in the zoning district. It's something that everyone has, but it's not addressed by statute.
Okay, so we can put our own timelines to it if we want to.
For the back end, yes.
Yeah.
You do need that notice.
Yes, but I guess what I'm understanding, the concern here is that someone comes to us and says, I would like to be assigned to the zoning district. We want to commit to them that we will take that up.
Yeah.
I think that's.
And if it is sat on for too long, I don't have an exact date under federal standards, it's usually about 2 years, but you can petition or you can appeal for failure to act.
Oh, that just kind of is an umbrella overall on this that I'm getting.
So it's good to have by the time.
Yeah.
Okay, good idea. The notifications here mostly that I just adopted 5 as per my note there, but I thought it was important that we include notification of a zoning district because it does affect the neighbors, for better or worse. So unless the planning staff thought those were inappropriate, I thought they applied here. It's got standard language, certified letters and all that.
We'll just need to change that 14 days before planning and zoning to 30 before planning and zoning, and then 14 before the board.
So we usually use the Administrative Procedures Act.
So this is not.
I sense a court case coming up.
We're not,
now
we're gonna make it clear that we don't court.
I mean, I guess
This is not an amendment to the resolution of general applicability. Now, these amendments are certainly Wyoming Administrative Procedure Act amendments. But changing a zoning designation for a particular parcel is not a rule change or promulgation of general applicability.
so we can do 14 days.
So you can do, well, so then statutorily, we have defined 30 days.
30 days before this board.
Before this
14
board,
days
and then 14 days before.
Okay.
Yeah. The county commissioners.
Okay, is that 2 different notices?
No.
You can go to all.
Yeah, I could probably say those different timelines.
So those are just corrections to what I've got here.
Yeah.
And I left in all of the tables, just I think those are relevant, and that's quite interesting. The commercial one is amusing. I mean, boy, that thing is, not only is it pretty broad, but the conditional uses are pretty broad on top of broad.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, on 5.1, there's a highlighted area in that section 2, the first paragraph, where, can't
read it.
Might-
Yeah, I can't read it either, so I don't know what.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, there, I have no changes were there. That's a word processing goof of mine. So, yeah, I'm not changing anything there. The yellow highlighting, is that what you're seeing?
Yeah.
It's like that, it's.
Yeah,
gobbledygook right
it
there.
almost looked like it pasted something else over the top.
No, no, that was just also does 5161. A garlic too. I didn't even do that, but I saw that. Yeah. So, yeah. Guess we'll try to straighten that out in the next version of PDF. And this is the zoning certificates, and there's really,
That would also be the place for clarification.
yeah. Just what those apply to. We have state statutes to refer back to, but they need some, but I like, those words are here that they could use. Feed on those bones. And that is about the size of it with then that chart. Tell us what that chart is. Is that part of the regulations, or is that just a little advisory that you put out, or what is that?
It's in the regulations. It was adopted, so it's regulation.
It isn't referred to anywhere in the text that I can see. So it just kind of sits here.
Interesting. Yeah, this is the process, approval process.
Well, all right, maybe I'll.
It's repeated in the application for the applicant.
Yeah, we do put this in.
Yeah, I don't object to it being there. It was just kind of odd. What is it?
Teton has a flow chart accompanying every single thing,
Oh, gosh.
which isn't that helpful, but
Right, they have complicated.
Oh, no, they've got an amendment to the text, and there's a big color chart, and then there's an amendment to the boundaries. Yeah. Oh, they really nailed it. Well, all right, I guess I'm hearing, there are a couple of things that I've pulled out of this. One was to put some timelines to it, and one was to get inside the zoning districts, or the two notes I've made from this discussion. So we will come back to perhaps a not terribly long work session. Okay, and address those two. Then we'll want to prepare this in a way that's conducive to public comment. So we clear up some of these little goobers like the text on top of itself. What's the normal procedure when you're distributing for public comment? PDF rather than Word?
it publishes better on file.
Yeah.
Okay, special session, work session, or this one might be available to not a great deal more time. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to where we were. Do we want to do that before the next meeting on the 10th? Do we want to move the 10th? Do we want to do it some other time? What's our thinking? We're probably looking for, I don't know, an hour or something.
I'd say two, just to make sure we get it done before regular time. If 3 o'clock works for everybody, and unless we wanted to move later and have this meeting a bit later too. That would be the other way to do that is have the work session at 5 and have our regular meeting at 7.
Do we have any sense of
Is that any conflict with anybody or help anybody out?
what else we're trying to do?
What's coming what's coming down the road for you guys in the next meeting?
August, I have one application.
Come on, Joe.
Maybe.
Embellish a little bit.
Yeah, well,
I
you
have-
sound like
I
you're
have
goofing off
7.
over there.
I have 7.
There's two wind farms,
complicated.
very controversial.
Yeah.
You have a nuclear plant coming in.
Okay.
I'm okay with you guys going ahead without me, and I can give my comments to somebody about how to address the.
You gonna write up a script?
Yeah.
You can give them to us. We can
Right, I can
distribute them.
just-
So, yeah.
Sure, I'll forward any thoughts onto them, and they'll all hash it out.
So would slipping a week make a difference to you?
Oh,
Yeah, I'll be in Afton
Oh, that.
all the time
that-
until I come back for another meeting on Thursday in Albany.
Okay, so the 10th works better.
10th works much better for me.
Okay.
We'll actually be working on those, on draft bills, on changing some more stuff on water, so.
Yeah. So there's multiple careers there. All right, Mr. Fine, let's stick with the 10th and make it a longer, earlier.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I would go to 5 o'clock, start at 5 and there, or I'm happy either way, but 5 is fine for me.
And earlier. If we want
I
to
do
do
that
it.
also.
Fine?
I tend to want to keep the meeting and do it before, because I just think for public access, the public is gradually getting used, I'm sure, to these meeting times. And so people plan accordingly, and it seems to work pretty well. We get people in the chairs, so that to me is saying, oh, we'll do this before the regular meeting.
So regular meeting on the 10th. Now, question would be, do we want to tack a couple hours in front of that or let it go long?
Well, that's what I was saying. I would prefer to start at 5
And just go long.
and go long. But I can do either way. So are you saying do the
So we do a
regular meeting
special
first?
session, 5 to 7, and then the regular meeting.
So let's let the applicants off the hook first before you get into the work session.
Well, now you just, that's the opposite of what I just said.
Right, no, I know, I'm thinking about the loan applicant.
Right.
And
It's,
whether they-
it's easier, in my mind, it's easier for the public to understand that we're doing a work session and there isn't public participation. I mean, they're free to watch, but then the regular meeting, full public participation. So
So we could start voting at 5 as per normal, and then just tack us up on front of it would suit me. That is contrary to what you were suggesting.
Yeah, I'm saying I prefer to start the work session at 5, but I'm perfectly fine doing it there. I don't want to stand in the way of other people.
Okay, Stein, what do you think? Would you rather start at 5 and push the regular meeting later, or do the special meeting at 3 and keep the regular meeting at 5?
Well, I'll defer to Mr. Kennedy's experience in this kind of thing. I think in the end of what we're here to do is, and I'm sensitive to some applicant coming in and saying, hey, it's 9 o'clock at night and you guys still haven't listened to me yet. And I've said it before. That isn't going on.
Okay, well.
yeah, we're already noticed for that for 5.
I'm okay with that. All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I'll go with the majority here. I'm just making my point. That's it.
Trying to assess the majority of the consensus, but it sounds like my preference would be put us in front of the regular meeting, just keep it as it is. August 10, 5 o'clock. If that's what you were suggesting, okay.
Well, my question was, because we're meeting later this month, is there already notice out for the next meeting?
Yes,
So,
regular meeting set at 5 o'clock.
yep, so we're set with that.
Change, but if we're okay with doing it that way, then. So we're going to tack a special meeting on August 10th, starting at 3 o'clock.
So, I mean, another option would be is to hold the regular meeting and then
Yeah,
just
and then
immediately following go
That's-
into our work session.
Yeah.
Oh, just
Yeah.
switch.
Sure,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I was-
Need stuff.
Because if we have one application,
We have one
well, right,
application.
yeah. We'll just
Okay.
Notice it, but it's not like 6 pages.
Well, we just put it on our
Yeah.
agenda
Yeah.
and then we send it to the boomerang like we do every time, so.
Yeah, it's a separate notice, but it's does it have to be scheduled?
We don't like advertise it, we just send it to.
Oh, wait, yeah, like 5 days.
No, you send it to the community calendar, whatever.
But what's
Like
that?
News or.
What's the answer? Can we, to be followed by, or do we have to schedule our special meeting at this time?
I don't think you have to schedule it. You just say
It's
it's
just
coming immediately
Work,
afterwards, right?
work
Just
session.
like
meeting.
on the agenda.
It's just part of the agenda, it's part of the regular meeting, so, yeah.
Now, procedurally, you would need to
Adjourn.
adjourn and then reopen special.
Yeah.
meeting.
So we had to set a time.
Although that's indistinguishable from an agenda, like we're doing right
Right.
now.
It is, but, I mean, because the special meeting has different parameters.
Okay.
As far as public participation. Or if it's a work session, then they're on notice that you're welcome to attend.
Yeah. Remind us, what's a special session versus a work session?
Special session has different rules about how soon you have to meet, and there's different notice requirements.
For a
which
special session.
we've never had a special meeting.
I don't think
Yeah,
there's
that I
work sessions.
remember.
I don't think work sessions define the statute.
It's not.
It's a special meeting.
Yeah.
The meeting with DEQ was the only thing I can think of.
Special meeting is
Called it a
statutory.
special
That was a work session, and
It's just the same.
yes,
It's something that this
Semantics.
county presumably.
Okay,
Yeah.
what do you guys want to call this thing we're gonna do?
work session.
Okay.
Oh, you just want to do a work session?
Yeah.
You can just give notice that
Yeah.
this is not open for public comment.
Okay,
Okay.
that sounds like the functional difference is public comment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you gotta listen to the public and take their input at that point.
Okay, so if I could sum up what I think I'm hearing. We're gonna meet at 5 o'clock on August 10th. And there's going to be an additional notice put out that says that meeting will be immediately followed by a work session, whatever a work session is. Agreed?
Great. So moved.
Okay, well, I guess we can make that a motion along with a motion to adjourn. How about that?
Are we doing anything for the planning and subdivision?
No, we are
We're gonna
waiting.
schedule
We're
that.
gonna eat the elephant one bite at
There
a
you
time.
go, there you go.
We do have,
I guess I shouldn't say adjourn. I was doing myself. All right, we've scheduled a session. And there's.
Do we want to?
Now, I guess this might take more than one for the zoning change. Just depending on changes that are brought forth, I mean, they have, as I have experienced firsthand, just massive ripple effects around the entire document.
Okay. All right, we'll agree on that. Now let's get back to our agenda. Okay, which consists of 3 updates. Okay, let's do it.
all right, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so to update you on the growth area management plan, it's moving along. We're in phase 2. Is that what we're in, Joe? Yep. It's called phase 2. We're continuing to collect public comment. There's a new survey. Mr. You please see that? I don't know if we've sent that out. We probably should send it out to these guys and everybody else to take that survey, or at least to look at it. We're narrowing down basically what the future land use plan will look like. What the survey has, with the questionnaire, has 3 different growth scenarios. It delineates the growth area, which is not just the 1 mile boundary. It's where we might logically actually grow. And then it includes, some different land uses and those types of things, and how we want to see that around the city. So that's out there.
Question on that. The gentleman that came into the office the other day with me was concerned that that survey didn't let you look at the whole survey. Did that get fixed?
It was modified, yeah. So you can
Okay.
see all 3 now.
Okay, thank you.
At least that's what the consultant said. I haven't actually.
I looked.
You looked, okay. So yeah, they did hear your comments and take care of it. So yeah, and we've been going to a number of different events. We've been at the county farmers market that they have at the fairgrounds. It's been at the city farmers market multiple times. They had a booth at the birthday celebration in the park, whatever it's called, July 4th. Yeah, that's the one. And then did they go to any other events? Yeah. Parade? I think we went to the parade.
We were gone that week.
Yeah, we were both out of town. But yeah, so they've been talking to a lot of people, getting a lot of good input. So that's kind of where we're at. We're working on. We're going to be doing some other internal reviews of like road type standards, those types of things. So they're working through those. They'll meet with the road and bridge and our county engineer at some point. The city folks to look at those types of things. But that's kind of where we're at. We're still getting the nuts and bolts kind of put together, doing a lot of outreach and getting input. Really, they got yelled out at one of the things, or yeah, so that was good. I wasn't at that one. So. I'm used to it in other meetings, so it's not a big deal. I'm not missing out, I think, so. Any questions on the growth plan?
One comment, I talked to the Cameron, who's leading the consultants, and he said, I asked him how many people are coming in. He said, one woman came in and said, so this is about that plan? I said, yeah. She said, so you're the enemy. Right out of the chute. Planners are the enemy. I thought it was interesting. He took it in stride, or the head of the chat. Yeah. Opinions differ.
Yep. All right, moving on to natural resource management plan. I guess that's the next one we have here. So that's at the Board of County Commissioners. The steering committee wrapped up their review. We took it to the board yesterday. We're going to be cleaning up we've cleaned up a lot of it. Joe's actually taking some time to clean up what we received from our consultants. Just there are some formatting things and things we needed to clean up. So we got that pretty much cleaned up. We're going to take it back to them for their comments, and if they want to make some changes at that meeting. And then once they make their changes, we'll put it out for comment for 30 days and schedule a public hearing before the Board of County Commissioners. So that's kind of where we're at. I think they were pleased with the improvements we made. And Maura, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think they're just wanting to do another round of public comment. That sounded fine with us.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. So I'm hopeful that we'll do this and we'll be done. But we'll do what we need to do to take input if we need to. So.
And are you through with the consultants? I know there was an issue in their contract.
Yes. So our grant ran out June 30th. And so we're doing it on our own now. So yeah. And then the Casper, any questions on that?
That was going in my head.
That's super exciting. Casper protection plan updates. So this is where I've got a few questions or updates for you that are pertinent to this board and you want to know about. But first, we've held some small group meetings. We came up with some different groups that are interested in that. We had the CAP network folks, or basically a property owner group, come together and we received comments from them. We had a technical group, which included geologists and engineering firms that work in that area, and with septics, other development, or subdivision developments, those types of things. And then we also met with the Aqua Group, the Albany County Water Advocates folks, and just they basically had a short PowerPoint and asked for feedback, and all of those groups were very, very well attended, and gave a lot of feedback. We tried to get a developers group specifically for folks that are developing up there, as well as a business group for business owners along there. We didn't receive any responses from the developer group. The business group, we had one formal response and one response that I received on that I knew the guy, and so we didn't hold meetings for those. But we are trying to, if those folks want to discuss things, we're going to try to arrange another meeting for them. But that's kind of where they're at. We're working through those things. The consultants are working up a draft with using those comments or changing the draft they already have, kind of together and put those comments in there. So I guess where you guys come into play is they would like to hold a joint meeting with Planning and Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, and Environmental Advisory Committee. They want to do that probably mid to later August. So you'll be receiving a poll from, I think, the city clerk's office on days that you may be available. Like participation, the way they're running this through, or what's being suggested, is to hold this group meeting or whatever. This will be kind of a collaboration between all these groups and kind of come up with changes to the draft. And then I think they'll do a public input after that, or do public comment period and some meetings with the public. They'll bring it back to the three groups at the same time. And then you'll have an opportunity. This will be more of a finalized draft. And if you guys, or if any of the groups want to make amendments, what will happen is then we'll come back at another time, maybe in separate, I'm not sure exactly how to plan out, but each group has to make, amendments, and then they have to get it all figured out together. And so they're trying to do this kind of as in a, same room type thing, which is going to be interesting because we've never done something like this or whatever. But I think what might happen is we'll get all in the same room, and then once the amendments are all kind of figured out by each group, and then we'll kind of mesh it together and see what the whole body agrees with, and we improve it that way. I don't know. This is kind of complicated. So. But anyways, the second joint meeting is planned for October-ish. And this is all pending some other meetings happening. So the August meeting, once we figure out that meeting, then that'll determine when we see it again in October. So, and then also you'll be getting a written update. Darren and I have been tasked to, Darren and Parkin at the cities, the water source guy that's working as my co-manager of this project or whatever, we'll be coming up with just kind of a written update that we'll provide you guys. So, any questions or comments on this?
The three groups you're saying are the two planning commissions and EAC?
I mean, EAC technically does not have, I don't know, they really don't have a say in any of this. So, I mean, honestly, if you guys have a problem with any of this too, I mean, that's up to this group to determine if this works for you. So if it doesn't, let me know, and then I'll let them know. But
as a land use plan, it has to go through this group and then to the board.
yes,
Just like it was a zoning amendment.
yes. The idea is they hope that we can all do this at the same time in the same room and make, separate motions. And so that's what I'm saying. It's complicated, and it's all because of the timeline that's on the project. We're just trying to get it as efficient as possible. Yeah.
So this August joint meeting, there will be a complete draft to review at that point.
I believe so, yeah. I think this will be like a first draft type thing. You guys will review it, and then we'll do public comment after that, I believe. I wish I brought my timeline, but I think we're gonna do public comment after the initial draft kind of is vetted by you guys. And then we'll do public comment and do the public meetings, and then come back with a more finalized draft at the October meeting, with the intent of getting, the okay of all the folks at the table, different tables for different groups.
But then it's city council and county commission.
Yes, yeah. So once it goes from us, then it goes to them. So now, if it comes to all these groups have different, like you guys want to do something, these guys want to do something, these guys want to do something, then It's gonna be really interesting.
This happened once before.
But it's already functionally what it's like in real life, right? Like they got their set of rules and we've got our set of rules, and where the city boundary meets the county, we have problems with our different set of rules. And so I think it's a noble goal, and I think it's doable because I think everybody will only benefit from having one set of instructions on how to deal with the aquifer between the city and the county, to level the playing field between what developers are expected to do. I mean, it just seems like this is a pretty worthy goal that people ought to be on board with. And because it's not like we're inventing a whole new plan, it's trying to fine tune an existing plan. So I think this is achievable.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess the EAC is in an advisory role, and everybody can take their advice, and, do what they will with it, and that we really have to come in alignment with the city.
Well, and I think that group's involvement is because when they did the original draft, it was, or the original CAT plan, it was done, part of that group, the subcommittee of that group or whatever. So they've got some expertise on there. So.
That's why the first aquifer protection plan was a joint city-county effort. Right from the get-go, it was run by EAC, which was itself a joint city-county thing. And then the update came around, why I was laughing a second ago, is that the county and the city didn't agree, and they went their separate ways and had two different caps. So that's totally doable. I think everyone agrees what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, and right now it's like, we're not seeing like huge changes. I mean, huge as in like, there's not like a wholesale change in the document. It's cleaning up the document. And then the big ticket items obviously are the boundary, the western boundary, which honestly, what's adopted by the county and the city now, it's lessened in a lot of areas where they've got data and they can show that, okay, you can move it this way. I mean, there are areas that move out a little bit farther the other way, or just other considerations that the consultant want to take into consideration. But anyways, that's one of the bigger issues. They've got some ideas for the site-specific investigation that are from the meetings we've already had are going to be more hot button as well. And then there's a few more recommendations, I think, for prohibited uses that are a little bit different, but we're not seeing like this huge, shift of the document. It's not changed to that. Now 50 feet of Satanka is good enough, or no, we actually want 100 foot of Satanka. That's not, none of that's changing. We're still in the same 75 foot premise, using that to determine where the lines go. And really, it's just taking the reports and the documentation and studies that have already been done and kind of putting those things into to this plan, and following some of the recommendations from those, or not. Some of them didn't really follow, but it's going to be a really fun project. Just by the meetings we already had, it's very emotional for some folks, and rightly so. I mean, this is going to affect and impact people, so people that live up there, people that don't live up there. So yeah, we'll see how it all goes, but that's all I really have on this.
David, going back to the growth area management plan, is there a hard deadline for that? When everything's supposed to be done and can go.
Everything's supposed to be done before the first of the year. So
first of the year.
By December or something.
Okay.
December, both plans. Yeah.
Okay.
They're on pretty much the same timeline. We'll just started later.
And done, by done, you mean established regulation passed city council board?
So by done on the cap, it's the plan. The plan is what is expected to get done. Done for the growth area plan is the plan, as well as a joint agreement between the city and the county, intergovernmental agreement for that area. Those are the things I think that according to the contracts that need to have done. So, and not necessarily have to have passed the agreement, but I think that's the goal, is to have it passed. I have to look at the contracts, but now when it comes to like specific regulations, to change our zoning regulations, none of that is expected to be done by the end of the year. So that will come after those plans are adopted. Now they'll have regulation suggestions, recommendations. Obviously, that's part of the plans, part of what they do. But yeah,
They'll give us something to do next year.
we will be busy for a while. Any other questions?
Good stuff. Other questions? Okay. Commissioner comments. I think we've all commented. That's to my satisfaction. Anybody else got anything they want to say? We've set the next meeting and we've warned the public down, so there are no citizen comments. And absent an objection, we'll call it adjourned. Thank you. See you next month.
Thank you, commissioners.
Made a suggestion that you did not. So what were you thinking?
Mike was saying a little touch cheek yesterday. Nobody commented, so they must all love it.
I think he was looking for like seriously angry comments as opposed to like take it or leave it. I don't know.
I just was amused that he met with that.